Just get going when a few people join in. Hopefully some folk will join in. Super. Looks like we've got a couple of people joining in, which is great. Obviously, very good evening for Celtic. I was very hopeful and expecting Celtic would get a draw out of tonight's game against Feyenoord, so getting 3 points and a win, obviously even better than what I was expecting. I went for a 1-1 draw. Most people on the channel were kind of not expecting very much on the day, so good result for Celtic. So, big surprise, I thought, for Celtic. I thought Celtic played really pretty well all the way through the game. I thought they battled very well. Yep, couldn't agree more. Anthony Flynn, 2759. It was a brilliant score. Brilliant score. I was a bit surprised. I was going for a 1-1 draw. I thought Feyenoord, on a bit of a poor run of form in Dutch football, they've won. They are currently second, I think, in the Dutch league, but they are 6 points behind PSV, and they're only won one game out of their 4 Europa League games so far, and so I was a bit surprised, given how Celtic have been, given the fact we've not been playing that well in any of the European matches, that we got so many goals. I was expecting actually that our back 4, be it Ralston or Donovan, Trusty, Scales, Tierney, were going to do a good job. Totally exactly. Clashman, Numpty, great result tonight. Stepping stone to success if all goes well. I was just listening. The reason I was a wee bit late starting up the live stream, I was just listening to the post-match interviews with McGregor and O'Neill. O'Neill, before the match, was talking sort of about maybe this being his last game, full stop. I think it's probably going to be his last game in terms of last time came in Europe. Be very, very surprised if he's still in charge in 2-3 weeks' time when we play Roma. But great to have you back, Sligo Boy 8152. Great to have you back under your usual name as well. Apologies for last week's wee mix up. So great result for us. Hatate, I thought Hatate and Engels both played very, very well in midfield. I thought Colby Donovan did remarkably well for such a young player. Defended very well, pushed forward. He was involved in several of Scott Celtic's moves. He set up a couple of corners. He defended well. I thought he played very well. See, Hatate and Engels, I think that's the best game they've had as a combination. Dyson Maeda wasn't really a threat on goal. However, he did have a big part to play in goals 2 and 3. He certainly chased down the defenders, chased down the goalkeeper to set up Hatate's goal. Yep. Great result, I think. Great result. It was a good team performance as well. I thought, for me, when I do come to the actual sort of marks out of 10 for tomorrow's video, it's been more of a team performance. I don't think anybody was really, really outstanding, but Engels, Hatate, Donovan, all did great. I thought Scales and Trusty did pretty well in central defence. Kasper Schmeichel made a couple of saves. It was a good all-round team performance. Slightly disappointed with Sebastian Ginecki when he came on. Don't really think Ralston and Bernardo had much of a chance. Nygren, not really in the game terribly much, but then as Nygren's shown this season, He is good at coming into the box late, and he smashed that into the top corner. Yep. Good evening to you as well, Paul Maguire. Great to have one of the early subscriber viewers to the channel still showing faith. That's great. Yep, Kasper Schmeichel made a couple of important saves, not brilliant saves, but important saves. McGregor headed it off the line. Some nice blocks by Scales and Trusty. There was that one that hit off the bar, but otherwise I thought Celtic did a good job. Wee bit of a boo-boo between Scales and Tierney early on to let Maeda in to score that first goal, but otherwise Tierney and Scales, Trusty, Donovan all defended very well. Yes, Yang is, sorry, I was trying to think who the other person I was impressed with. Yang, lots and lots of commitment. He made several good runs. He came back and defended. He helped in midfield. He made some lovely runs, showed a lot of pace, beat a few players. His final ball, as always, wasn't great. However, as he often does do well, he came in at the back post, a bit like Maeda used to do on the other side. Came in at the back post and a really calm finish to get us back into the game at 1-1. So well done to Yang. Again, he's a very frustrating player. I think he's got talent, but he's just so inconsistent. And when he's bad, he's really bad. But I think we got a good performance out of Yang. And also quite clear in training that people like O'Neill and Maloney have been really giving him a big boost to his confidence. Yep. I think both Yang and Donovan apparently got sort of singled out in training as to how well they were doing, and they got praise in the post-match interviews. So, yep, really good all round. So some of the players who've had a bit of a poor season, such as Yang, Maeda to a lesser extent. Hatate's been very disappointing this season, but Engels has had a few good performances and a lot of rubbish performances, but tonight he was good. Yes. Certainly the commentators were suggesting that the lack of about 10,000 of the usual ultra Feyenoord fans who were banned for flares and pyrotechnics may well have just changed the atmosphere. I think the end Celtic were attacking in the second half was completely empty. I think all the Celtic fans were behind the end that Kasper Schmeichel was defending in the second half. And there is always the worry with Celtic having got themselves into one or two wee problems with pyrotechnics and banners and chants and various different things with UEFA. There's always a chance that Celtic might get threatened with that sort of thing, be it in the Scottish Premiership, be it in potentially in UEFA, because obviously for the Cup semi-final against Rangers, both Rangers and Celtic had a partial ticket ban for pyrotechnic reasons. And it certainly felt from watching on television. Obviously, I wasn't at the ground in Rotterdam, but it certainly felt and sounded like the fans were 100% behind the players. And Nygren particularly did comment on how much energy and support the fans had given them to keep going. And yes, the Japanese centre forward Maeda was really good. I think Watanabe, who's Japanese as well, he did a pretty good game as well. But Maeda looks like a class above most things we see in Scottish football. I don't think there's any real chance he's going to come to Scotland. Apparently, he's the top scorer in the Dutch Premier League, the Dutch top division. So even though Feyenoord aren't having a brilliant season at home, they do have the top goal scorer in the league. certainly it was the comparing this year's Europa League to last year's Europa League. 10 points was enough to get you into the knockout phase. 11 would practically guarantee Celtic getting into the knockout phase. So that's us on 7 points now. We've got 3 games to go. Home game against Roma. Roma look like they're coming into a bit of form again now. Utrecht have that's our last game. They've been rather poor. I think they were losing when I last looked, and the other game is Bologna. And they also have been a wee bit slow getting into their form this season, but certainly there's every chance, I think, of getting 4 points out the last 9, which would almost certainly get us into the knockout phase, probably in one of the lower seeded positions. But given the fact that we had a bit of a disappointment in Midtjylland and a bit of a disappointment with Braga at Celtic Park, if we were to scrape into the knockout phase, that would be great. It certainly seems to me, in my opinion, it keeps Celtic's Europa League campaign going. Obviously, the more wins and more points Celtic can get, the better in terms of Celtic's coefficient, but also more importantly, Scotland's coefficient. Because next, assuming that we win the league this year, as I fully expect, we're going to be in fairly middle rounds of the Champions League qualifiers. The likelihood is, if with the way that Rangers and Aberdeen have been doing so far, that we're probably going to drop even further down as a nation in the coefficient league. So it could be back to having 3 or 4 rounds of qualifying to go through, which has not been terribly successful for us in the past. Well, my hope is, assuming that Wilfried Nancy does come in to be Celtic's manager tomorrow, Saturday. Certainly a lot of the rumours were suggesting that it's going to be announced on Friday, but that O'Neill will take the team on training on Saturday and the game on Sunday. Obviously, that's all still to be announced. Also, some suggestions that some suggestions that a couple of the coaches who are part of O'Neill's staff will be staying on as well to help out Nancy. The stories I heard a couple of days ago was that Nancy was going to bring 4 people with them. Story I read this morning was suggesting it was just going to be Nancy and Ampadu, the assistant manager, but we'll see who turns up. I certainly personally wouldn't really fancy moving from America to Scotland at the moment. If they've got kids and spouses and mortgages and stuff in America, it maybe isn't the best thing to come and move lock, stock and barrel from America to Scotland. But I think all the others that he might be bringing with him are either French or Irish. Yep. Yes, so I think you've really hit the nail on the head there, Breezy Ice. 27. I think Celtic's team spirit, team morale, team confidence is very high. It's really, I think it's a massive change to see the players on the pitch, on the bench, and in the tunnel and in post-match interviews. They're smiling, they're laughing, they're all enjoying each other's company. They're really celebrating with each other. It feels like they're back together as a team. I would fully expect, even with the change of manager from O'Neill and Maloney to Nancy and his team, because there will be, I think, a couple of the current Celtic coaches still around. Maybe Martin O'Neill stays around as a bit of an advisor for a few weeks just to help with the transition. And obviously, Maloney, if he doesn't stay as a coach with Nancy, will go back into that sort of transition player development role that he was doing before. So obviously Maloney's still going to be in the background one way or the other. certainly with the way that Nancy plays, he typically plays a 3-4-2-1. I think with the way that players like Yang and Maeda play the wide role, they could play out wide in that 4. They could play in the 2. Maeda could play in the main striker role. I think the main striker role also would probably suit Kenny really well. There is quite a lot of speculation, obviously, that Maeda is going to be leaving in the winter time, and there are a couple of players supposedly at Columbus Crew that Nancy might well be bringing in. Breezy Ice. So just to where are we? Just got a little player profile here. So Breezy Ice was talking about this player who currently plays for Columbus Crew. So he's played with Wilfried Nancy, although not for actually terribly long, as he only joined Columbus Crew in July of this year. For Columbus Crew, he's scored 5 games, 3 goals, 1 assist. He had a really successful time in Saudi League with Al Alhi, 60 games, 38 goals, 10 assists. Over his whole career, 242 games, 115 goals, 25 assists. So pretty much 1 goal every 2 games, which is a very good record. 6'1", so he's a big, strong player. He's actually got a lot of pace, 2-footed, good in the air. He's actually born in Denmark and played for Denmark under 17, under 18, under 19, under 20. Then, when it came to full internationals, he decided to play for the country his parents' origin, which is Palestine, and he's a Palestinian international. 11 games, 4 goals. And the slight snag with him, as I say, he only joined Columbus Crew 3 months ago, so they are in their closed season, so they may sell him on. He's currently valued around about £5.2 million. That price might well go up and up. And one of the snags with him only having joined 3 months ago is that his contract runs through to the very end of 2027. So he's actually contracted for 2 full years more with Columbus Crew. So they may be reluctant to sell him at this stage, unfortunately. But there are several videos of he's playing in Danish football and for Al Alhi. He scored a hat-trick for Al Alhi in the FIFA World Club Championships earlier on this year. Against, I think it was Porto that he scored the hat-trick again. So he actually can score at the highest level. He scored a bundle of goals in Denmark. Then he moved to Saudi League football and now into Major League Soccer. The other player that Nancy might well be bringing, and this would be more of a like-for-like replacement for Dyson Maeda, in that Diego Rossi can play as an out-and-out centre-forward striker. He can play a wide role. He can play an attacking midfielder, so one of the 2 behind the main striker. He could push. He also, one of the things with Wilfried Nancy, although he does like a 3-4-2-1, he often does play a 3-4-3, 4-4-2, a 3-5-2. He is actually very, very fluid in terms of his formations and his tactics. So he has got this reputation for sticking to a 3-4-3, a 3-4-2-1, but according to quite a few of the American football pundits, the Major League Soccer people, he actually does change his formations a lot. And he does actually have a very good reputation as being a very good coach, a very good educator of players, and he apparently very quickly gets across his formation, his tactics, his so on to the players. So this other player that's rumoured to be a target that Nancy might want to bring in, Diego Rossi, 27 years old, 5'7", so very, very similar to Dyson Maeda, Uruguayan international, which will be helpful with us also having Marcello Sirachi at the club at the moment. He's thought to be around about £7.5 million. He's got one more full season in under contract with Columbus Crew, so they may well be willing to sell him at this stage. He's been at Columbus Crew for a good 2 and a bit years. Good record at Columbus Crew, 19 goals and 45. Previously, LAFC, also Major League Soccer, 59 goals and 121, and a goal every 2.5 games, and a good record for assists. And his record actually is very, very similar in practically every way to Dyson Maeda. Dyson Maeda, similar number of career games. Dyson Maeda scored a few less goals in his career and a few less assists. So I think Diego Rossi could actually be a very good player for Celtic if as is assumed, Dyson Maeda does leave the club in January. And if we could get Diego Rossi for around about 7.5 million, 10 million, whatever, I think we certainly are going to get a lot more than that I think we're going to get a lot more than that for Dyson Maeda. One would expect maybe 20 million, 25 million for Dyson Maeda. Sorry, I've missed one or two of the wee comments. I'm sorry. Yes, I personally would like to see. I think Fotheringham would be a good option to keep at the club as a coach to help out Wilfried Nancy. I think Maloney would be a good one to be in the backroom team as well. I think both of them would be really good backups to his usual staff. Yes, so Abu Ali Wazam Abu Ali, the Danish Palestinian striker, he has height, he's got strength, he's actually remarkably quick for a man of his height. He looks like a very good all-around player. Obviously, growing up in Denmark, it wouldn't be such a big culture shock coming to play in Scotland. Personally, I think there are a lot of really good quality players currently playing in Major League Soccer. I think it's a wee bit similar. My personal feeling is a wee bit similar to when Ange Postecoglou came to us back in 2021. He obviously had a really, really good understanding of J League soccer. We've signed some great players from the J League. Possibly, Dyson Maeda, obviously, Kyogo, Hatate, to a lesser extent, Tomoki Iwata. We've signed a couple of disappointing players from Japan. I got a strong feeling that if Inamura and Shin Yamada get a chance under the new manager, as might well happen, I think those two actually are going to turn into really good players. There may be a role actually with the ability that Hayato Inamura's got in terms of passing. He might well actually fit in really well into a back three, given the fact he is actually confident coming out of defence and passing. So he actually might be a player that fits in really well with Wilfried Nancy's way of playing, because he likes his central defenders to be able to pass, and he is a very, very good passer. Not the best of defenders, but I think he can learn. He's a very intelligent player, I think, Hayato Inamura. So we'll see. Yes, you're entirely right. Looking at all the sort of the post-match review type things for Columbus Crew's games in the second half of the season, Rossi plays all over the front three, and so he can, if required, play the wide role in the four as well. But he's certainly his best in one of the front two or the lone striker. Well, my personal feeling is that my personal feeling, and obviously I have every possibility of being wrong. I don't think the politics of signing a Palestinian player would be of any. I don't think it'd be of any concern to the club. The board, etc., have actually spent not spent donated a lot of money to various Palestinian charities and relief funds and so on. I don't think it would be a factor. He is actually, as well as being a Palestinian international, he is actually Danish by birth and Danish by upbringing. His parents still live in Denmark rather than Palestine. He's been the majority of his career was in Denmark, as I said, up until his early 20s. Then he went off to Saudi for a couple of years, and he's been in America for a few months. So I don't think it's a problem, nor do I think the amount of money that it's liable to take to buy Rosie or Abu Ali is a factor. But you never know. I don't know. I think your point is well made. I don't think it would be a factor. Obviously, if Celtic have got a player who is a Palestinian international or a Danish Palestinian player, the fact that we're waving Palestinian flags would be just like it would be if we were waving a flag for Kyogo or waving a Tunisian flag for Chinyeki or Democratic Republic of Congo flag for Balikwisha or whatever. So I don't think it's a particular. I don't think it's a particular problem, but I'm no expert at all. Yes, my plan was, once assuming that Nancy is the one who's going to come in, probably tomorrow is what the stories are suggesting. Once that happens, I was going to look more closely at Columbus Crew. The two people I've looked at particularly are Abu Ali and Diego Rossi. But they actually have quite a lot of different players. One of the slight snags with Columbus Crew having been so successful 2 seasons ago in America is they lost quite a lot of their players. Some came over to Europe, some went to the bigger, richer clubs in Major League Soccer. So he actually had to do a wee bit of a rebuilding job at Columbus Crew this season that's just finished. Yes. Well, I don't think Martin O'Neill would have any ability to be a chairman or a chief executive officer. I certainly think he might be a brilliant person to put on the board. I think he would be a very good ambassador for the club. I think if he was on the board and he had a particular oversight of scouting, recruitment, play and the players in general, I think that would be a great thing. The role of being a chairman and the role of being a chief executive officer actually is, from what I've read, incredibly difficult, incredibly technical. There's an awful lot of skills you need to do, particularly to be a chief executive officer. An awful lot of work with finances, stock exchanges, investors, an oversight of pretty much every different department of the club. I think it's a very, very specialised role, and also you need to have a very strong understanding of the law. Now, you're just about to say that Martin O'Neill actually is a qualified lawyer. My understanding was that when he was a young man at university, he did get a law degree and then committed more to his professional football career. So theoretically, I think O'Neill would be a brilliant member, a brilliant person to add to the board, or a brilliant person to have as a club ambassador. The problem with him having an actual director of football role or a more hands-on role is the fact that I suspect he wants to get back to his life in London, which is where his family is. It's where his main house is. I can certainly see him popping up and down. Yeah. Yes, but my feeling is, and is that Celtic have been throughout their whole history a club that doesn't care about skin colour, race, religion. Some of Celtic's greatest players have been from all religions, all skin colours. We were the first ever club in Britain to have a player coming from the Indian subcontinent way back in the 50s. Celtic broke the mould with lots of different things over the years in terms of player recruitment and nationality, etc. So, and as you're quite right, we did have a number of really good Israeli players, Biram Kayal, Nir Bitong, Lila Bada, etc. So, well, you have. I don't personally think that I think to take on the role of a chairman or take on the role of chief executive officer, that would require O'Neill to be at the club day in, day out for hours and hours and hours and hours and hours and hours and hours, and flying all over Europe and all over the world for meetings. I know Lowell's not a very popular person, but he is very, very heavily involved in 2 or 3 worldwide football organisations, the European Club Coalition, which is the one that's looking possibly to improve Champions League monies and TV contracts, and maybe even look to start up a European Super League. So, I would love Martin O'Neill to stay at the club. However, if he was going to be Peter Lawwell's role as a chairman, that would require him being at the club 340 days of the year. And being able to come in to the club at half an hour's notice in the times of crisis or whatever. So I don't see that. I don't see O'Neill committing to that kind of role. Now, I might be wrong with this one, but Kai Wagner, I think, was a player actually that Celtic were rumoured to have been looking at a couple of years ago. When we were looking for left-sided sort of wing backs and defenders and so on. So I think he was actually a player that was rumoured to be on Celtic's radar a few years ago. Well, certainly, from what I've seen of Wilfried Nancy's tactics, he really likes his central defenders to be able to step into midfield and hit a pass through the defence. He apparently has a very good reputation for breaking down defensive teams in Major League Soccer. Yes, so one of the 4 people rumoured to be coming with him is a person who is very highly regarded for analytics and for player assessment, player recruitment, player scouting, etc. And I think the implication is he has a similar system to the one that Hearts have been using and Brighton's been using and a lot of different clubs have been using in terms of finding good players. Very good, very good. Yes, so Lila Bada was a surprising, for a 19-year-old player, he was surprisingly good. When he came in for us. Now I was reading a story was that he had a great start to his time in Major League Soccer, then it all completely fell away. And then he was being rumoured to being transferred to, I think it was a team in Spain, in France, like Toulon or Toulouse or whatever. But that's all kind of fallen apart. Not sure whether Lila Bada would be how he would feel about coming back to Celtic. Reportedly had a really quite a difficult time, more with the people of Glasgow rather than with Celtic itself. When he was here last, we found it very difficult to go out and about in Glasgow without being sort of picked on and victimised and attacked and stuff, or verbally attacked, not physically attacked. Yep. Not a player that I've particularly followed before. I do think it's actually a good thing to have a nucleus of players from different countries. I think it's also really important at a club like Celtic that we do have a good number of Scottish and Irish players in amongst the team as well. I think it's quite important to pass on how special Celtic is. So I do think it's really important to have players like Forrest and McGregor, Tierney, Ralston, McCowan, Dane Murray, etc., etc. I think it's really important. But it's also, I think, good in terms of players settling down that you have maybe 2 or 3 players from one nation to support other players coming in. So obviously we've been really good with Japanese players. Even if Maeda and Hatate move on in the winter, we still would obviously have players like Inamura and Yamada still here. Obviously, if we were to sign Diego Rossi, we would then have Marcello Sirachi, and I really do hope that Celtic do go after Marcello Sirachi to sign him permanently, because I've been really, really impressed with him. I was a wee bit sceptical when he came up on Celtic's radar and then we signed him on a loan. I really, really hope that we can convince him to stay at Celtic. I haven't seen him. I haven't seen any confirmation that Nancy is going to bring in a new goalkeeper. Obviously, with Kasper Schmeichel being in the last year of his contract, and he reportedly wasn't keen on looking at a new contract until maybe the springtime. My personal feeling at the moment would be if Schmeichel wants to stay, I would be very happy for him to carry on and then be one-on-one with Sinisalo to see who's going to be the number 1 goalkeeper next year. I thought Kasper Schmeichel actually did a pretty good job today, made some important saves. When it was 1-1, he made a save. When it was at 2-1, he made a save as well. So a couple of times he did stop Feyenoord getting back into the game. Nice to have somebody on from another club. I don't know the answer to that. I'm not based in that part of the country. I don't actually get to terribly many games at Celtic Park, but it's nice. It's good. It's good all round, and I do actually enjoy having chats with other clubs' supporters, as long as it's all pleasant, polite, etc. That was a name that before. He certainly his name very much came up even before Wilfried Nancy was being suggested. He was very, very impressive at the under-21 international tournament. There's also Celtic are said to be the number 1 favourites to get a very, very talented 17-year-old Irish player who apparently was one of the best players at the under-17 FIFA tournament just recently. So I think obviously there's going to be quite a number of players linked to Celtic. So certainly the Moroccan player has a very, very good reputation. Not a player I've seen particularly. Yeah, fair enough. Of course, Jurgen Klinsmann went across there. He was the made American international manager for a wee while, so not terribly surprising that his son his son has gone on to be a successful player. I didn't actually know that he was a goalkeeper, but yes, yep. So Noonan is this 17-year-old player, scored age 16 and a bit for Shamrock in the Conference League, youngest ever player to do that, and he scored a good number of goals in the recent FIFA Under-17 tournament. And the wee small story I was reading about him this morning was he's thought to be the future of Irish players. So if Celtic were able to get him in as a 17, 18-year-old, can't remember, there are certain rules about changing countries at certain ages. So if Celtic were able to sign him, reportedly under the nose of Manchester City and Manchester United, it may be that I would personally think coming to Celtic's a much better option for him than it would be going to Man City or Man United. Yes. The two players, Clashman Umpty, I was disappointed with were Sebastian Chiniecki. He gave the ball away rather a lot in midfield. A couple of times, his passing was very poor. His runs were very poor. He did have a really good chance when he was put through by Arnie Engels, but he completely got it stuck under his feet. And I thought McCowan playing out of position. There were several times, I think, if we had had a player out wide who had some pace, we could really have made quite a lot of more inroads down that side. However, to be fair to McCowan, it was his super pass to Rio Hatate for Rio Hatate to put the ball across to the back post for Yang to score the first goal. So I think McCowan deserves a wee bit of credit for some good passes, but you're entirely right. His lack of pace and his lack of ability to beat a man was a pretty major factor, and he was a player I was a bit disappointed with. A couple of players like Ralston and Paulo Bernardo didn't really have enough time at the end to really get into their game, into the flow, but they both did decently at the end. Okay, I'll take your word for it, but certainly the stories that I read, and again, what you take, every story you take with a pinch of salt, where that he is keen to come to Celtic, he thinks Celtic's a better option, he wants to come and play for Celtic, so anybody who wants to come and play for Celtic is fine by me. No, there are quite a number of teams in the Irish League who have come through in the last couple of years. Of course, Johnny Kenny had a couple of good seasons on loan. He scored goals last year in the Conference League, and Ireland's been doing better and better in the Conference League style competition, which I think is a good. So I think any possible influence Celtic players, Celtic managers, Celtic coaches, Celtic boardroom executives people have to get him to come and sign for Celtic, the better. And hopefully we get him, if he does want to come and play for us, get him signed on a nice long contract. Give him some games this season off the bench and then get him more and more into the side over the years, and hopefully he turns into a really, really good player for Celtic. But Oops. So, don't know what other people feel, but there have certainly been a few Celtic fans I've been chatting with and discussing with who are kind of saying that Celtic should kind of just put the European campaign on the back burner and concentrate fully on the domestic side of things, the league and the League Cup to start with, and then obviously once the League Cup's out the way in a couple of weekends' time, we can then start looking towards the Christmas and New Year games, and then after that, the start of the Scottish Cup. I personally think Celtic should. I think a big result like tonight's 3-1 win, I think that will give Celtic's players an awful lot of confidence going into the game against Hibs on Sunday. The only player who looked like he might have been injured was Colby Donovan. It looked like he got a wee bit of a late tackle done on him over on the far side of the pitch a few minutes before he came off. Looks like he's probably the only player who might be carrying an injury. Obviously, Kelechi Iheanacho was fit enough to play on the bench. Marcelo Sarachi, I think, was probably is just an extra few days away from that. So maybe Sarachi would be on the bench on Sunday, which would be helpful because it means we could stick to having Trusty and Scales as our two central defenders and not having to swap Scales across to the left side. Didn't work quite so well, I didn't think, tonight, having Scales playing at left back. He did decently, but he actually, I thought, had a better game at left back against St Mirren than he did when he swapped over later on in the game tonight. Yes, so I think I'm pretty sure, assuming that Nancy comes in tomorrow or on Saturday, I'm pretty sure what he'll do is keep much of what Martin O'Neill has been doing with these players, and then little by little he'll start bringing in wee tactical tweaks. As I said, he's got a reputation for being very good at getting his tactics and changes over to players and coaches. He's got actually a very good reputation for training other coaches. There was someone I was watching on YouTube who does a football coaching site, and he was saying that Wilfried Nancy was doing a sort of a master class, a teaching class for all these UEFA level coaches during the summer, and he was very, very impressive. Some very, very different ways of training players, tactics, and so on. Tends to make training fun rather than just being sort of all metronomic and boring. Yes, so my personal feeling is with Wilfried Nancy, he'll come in, he'll probably keep things much the same as they are at the moment. I don't think he's going to swap to his general system straight away. I think the good thing about Celtic's players is we actually do have the players to fit his 3-4-2-1 system. We've got the players to do a 3-5-2. So I think what he'll do is he'll work out what he's got over the next couple of weeks, and then he'll start finalising which players to go for in the winter window. I'm very sure that he wouldn't be agreeing to coming across the Atlantic from a very successful, safe job with Columbus Crew. I think there's a very, very low chance he was ever going to lose his job at Columbus Crew for a season or two, given the fact that he's brought them such massive success on a small budget in a small TV market. So I can't see him coming across to Scotland unless he's been told that he's got a significant transfer budget for January, and the same again in the summer. Hopefully this analyst person he's bringing with him is as good as he's supposed to be. and that we can actually bring in a few good players. And I say, if we can bring in a few good players from Major League Soccer, I think that could be a really good market for us. In general terms, the transfer fees to get players from Major League Soccer is much as the same as it is from Japanese, i.e., it's not actually a massive amount of money to buy really good players from Major League Soccer, and could well be that we could get both Rossi and Abu Ali from Columbus Crew for under 20 million for the two put together, which would be probably covered by Dyson Maeda leaving for Leeds or Everton or wherever he's going to end up. Some stories suggesting that Leeds are going to be the next manager to sack their manager in England, and that Brendan Rodgers supposedly is the number one favourite to take over at Leeds if they do sack their manager in the next week or two, which would be quite interesting, particularly if he does take Dyson Maeda down there as one of his first signings. Yes, so the speculation is certainly over the last couple of years in the Europa League, 10 points got you into the top 24. There were a couple of teams last season in the Europa League who did get to 10 points, but were below the 24 level on goal difference. So I think certainly 4 points, i.e. 11 points for Celtic, would almost definitely get us into the top 24. 10 probably would be enough because there's an awful lot of teams all clumping together in that sort of lower section of the qualifiers. Yes. Yep. That's where certainly Nancy came from. He played his professional football in France. Most of his coaches came from French football as well. He's actually he was in Canada for quite a number of years before he came to Columbus Crew. He did a lot of his early coaching at colleges, and so the Canadian college system, and then started coaching in academies for professional teams, working his way up to be Thierry Henry's assistant manager, and then taking over from Thierry Henry around COVID times. Yes, he had a fairly brief brief career in French football, and then as he relatively young, he sort of retired and went into coaching, and so although he's only had 4 years as an actual head coach manager, he has got 20 years of being a coach at various different levels in Canada and now in America. So he is actually a relatively experienced coach, just only for 4 years at the highest level. Yep. Yes. Fantastic result. You're quite right, Michelle Shaw. A fantastic result. They did play well, and I thought they played very well as a team. And they showed a lot of spirit. Obviously, going 1-0 down away from home after 11 minutes. For many teams, especially with the way that Celtic were under Brendan Rodgers for that last couple of months, I personally don't see the Brendan Rodgers team coming back from being 1-0 down after 11 minutes. But the team spirit, I thought, fighting for each other, the way that Kasper Schmeichel was motivating everybody after we did get the equaliser, I think all these are very, very good, strong factors. And I think the restoration of team spirit, team confidence, team bonding, etc., has been started off by Martin O'Neill, but it's been kept going by the McGregors and the Tierneys and the Schmeichels off the scenes and in the training and stuff. So I can certainly see that carrying on. I think in terms of Celtic's ability to be a force in Europe. I think Celtic's problem of being a force in Europe is down to the fact that Scotland's national coefficient in UEFA club competitions is very poor, and it's getting steadily worse. And the fact that it's also the coefficient is kind of a year or two behind how we actually are at the moment. So I think Scotland's coefficient is going to get poorer and poorer, which means that Celtic and Rangers and Aberdeen and Hearts and so on are all going to be starting next season's European competitions at earlier and earlier stages, and we won't have the guaranteed place in the Champions League we had for a couple of years previously. Obviously, this year we had just one qualifying round to get through, which we failed. I suspect next year it's going to be 2 or 3, and the season after that it's going to be 3 or 4, which is rather unfortunate. Yes, the last 3 games, Roma, Bologna. So Bologna is the last away game, home game against Roma, home game against Utrecht. In theory, winning against Utrecht might just be enough. When I last looked, Bologna and Roma weren't in the best of form. They were in decent form, but not in great form. So I think there is a possibility of getting a point or 2 off the 2 Italian clubs combined, and be very, very hopeful by the last game of the group phase that Utrecht will be out of it, which might well give Celtic a even better chance of taking 3 points off them. Yep. So I think I completely agree with you there. We probably do need 4 points. 3 points would have been enough last year, would have been enough previous years. But I think 4 points would definitely get us into that one. Especially because there's a big clump of teams all around the same levels, and they are liable to take points off each other. So I think the quality in the Europa League is fairly similar from the top ones to the ones in the sort of 18 to 24 bracket. Even the ones who are in the non-qualifying bracket, I think there's a lot of decent teams in that lot as well. Just they're not actually hitting top form yet. There's something to be said for if we did have Martin O'Neill as our permanent manager, or manager to the end of the season, that there at least would be continuity and so on. But I don't think personally that O'Neill wants to carry on being Celtic's manager. I think at the age of 73, I think he was planning for a month or 2 months in charge, and then handing over to someone in time for Christmas. Then he can go back to his radio shows and his speaking engagements and his occasional television engagements, and be a Celtic ambassador. And I would really love Celtic in some way or other to get him involved again in the team. Yes, it was fun to watch Celtic tonight. I had a good feeling that I thought that they would get a point tonight. The fact that they got themselves back into the game and then fought hard, got the second goal. Again, Maeda didn't do an awful lot otherwise in the game, but he harassed the goalkeeper into a bad kick out. He harassed the defender, got the ball off him to give the ball to Megan for the third goal. He ran about with lots of energy. He tracked back to help at left back and midfield and everywhere. So he wasn't a massive threat himself in front of the goals, but it was good to see Celtic winning away from home. It's been a long time since Celtic won away from home. I think they were saying Ferencváros 4 years ago was the last time we'd won away from home in Europe. So great for Celtic to win, especially because we were beating a team who is several levels above us in terms of coefficients and rankings. The Dutch League way above Scottish League. Dutch League has 2 teams guaranteed every year into the Champions League, with a third going through qualifiers. So the Dutch League are an awful lot more powerful than the Scottish League, a lot more strength and depth in the Dutch League as well. Obviously, big teams like PSV, Feyenoord, Ajax, some good up-and-coming teams like Utrecht and Go Ahead Eagles coming out of there as well. So, well, the good thing is, smell the glove, we don't need to swap anything from tonight, but it would be great to have 3 points against Hibs at the weekend. The next game after that is Dundee, although we did lose to Dundee 2-0. 2-0, obviously, under Brendan Rodgers a few weeks ago. I don't think Celtic's going to be caught napping and caught underprepared like we were against Dundee the last time. I think whoever is the manager, be it Wilfried Nancy, with some of the current Celtic coaches, I think he's going to go into the game fully prepared, with lots of different plans about how they're going to break down Dundee's defence, how they're going to stop Dundee's quick counter-attacks. Yes. PSV last night came out all guns blazing against Liverpool, got a lead. Liverpool actually, I thought, looked better for the second 2/3 of the first half. They could well have got an extra goal or two. However, in the second half, Liverpool very poor. PSV looked really good. And I think I'm right in saying that PSV are currently 6 points ahead of Feyenoord at the top of the Dutch league, with Ajax a wee bit further down the league. But in terms of qualifying for the knockout phase, I think 1 win and 1 draw will get us there. I think 1 win and 2 draws definitely would get us there, and might even get us a home seeding in that first knockout phase. But we'll just cross the bridges when we come to them. Yes, no, PSV. PSV looked very, very strong yesterday. Admittedly, they were against a very disorganised, low in confidence Liverpool team who seemed to have very much fallen off the cliff this season. I was going to say that I thought the game against Hibs on Sunday was going to be potentially a more difficult game for us than it would have been had we been taking on Rangers or Hearts at this time. However, they did lose 2-0 to Motherwell just a couple of days ago. Now it may be that Hibs are going to be a lot more fired up for the Celtic match on Sunday. Always think Celtic are maybe not quite so good in away games on a Sunday at 12 noon. We've had a few really rather poor performances, such as the game against St Johnstone the spring past, which was an early kickoff. I don't think Celtic tend to do terribly well in their away games, starting around about lunchtime, 12 noon on a Sunday. Yes. It's certainly going to be interesting, as I said a wee bit on previous live streams and videos. My feeling was that much like Aberdeen last year, the Hearts bubble was going to burst just when they started to get problems with fitness and injuries and player fatigue and suspensions. When I last looked, a couple of their best players were out injured, including Shankland and their really good midfielder. And without Shankland and the midfield strength, Kazidis and Braga weren't looking quite so powerful. And also they didn't have Halkett in their defence due to suspension. And I think Hearts will remain up near the top of the table, but I'm very sure with time Celtic will overhaul them. No. I think it's going to. You're quite right. I think it's going to do wonders in terms of their confidence. I think also, given the fact it was a very good team performance all round, given the fact they fought back from 1-0 down to an early goal, I think all these things are very, very good. Certainly, the players looked happy, smiling, and all part of a team, which for spells this season we didn't. Certainly the 2 games against Kairat Almaty, we seemed a very, very disorganised, demoralised, low confidence group, and the performances they had against Kairat Almaty were very much like that. Yes. I don't think the board didn't know that the squad didn't need replacing. I think they fully accepted that it needed replacing. It would appear, for one reason or another, a lot of the deals that they were hoping to get to go over the line didn't go over the line. It would appear a lot of the negotiations fell through. There are several people who are Scottish football agents who said at the time, and again, I've got no idea whether this is right or wrong, they said it was the fact that Celtic weren't guaranteed a place in the Champions League was what was causing a lot of players not to want to come to play for Celtic until we got into the Champions League. And of course, the players that we had in the club already failed us against Kairat Almaty on 2 occasions. The story was, according to a couple of different football agents who speak on Scottish TV and radio and podcasts, that there were 2 or 3 players all lined up to come in at the last minute in the final week. And as things turned out, we got Chinyeki and Balikwisha in the final week. Actually, we got them almost in the final minute, and then of course we got Iheanacho the day after the transfer window shut. So I think I don't think there's any disputing the fact that I think the board knew that the team needed strengthened, but they were unable to get the players to come in for one reason or another. Unfortunately, we're never going to get told what their reasons are, but hopefully people like Paul Tidsdale have been working hard behind the scenes. The people who are the scouts and the recruiting people have been working hard behind the scenes from the start of September through to now. Someone was saying earlier on that one of the people that Nancy is rumoured to be bringing with him is a very good, high-quality analyst who's got a very good system. Certainly, Nancy's backroom team and Nancy himself had a very good reputation for signing players and bringing through players. They won the American League a couple of seasons ago, and as a result, they lost 3 or 4 of their best players, and he actually did a good job of replacing them and bringing in players from all over the place. So hopefully Nancy can bring in a good backroom team, can improve the scouting and the recruiting, and work with the existing structures at Celtic and improve them. I think Trusty and Scales actually dovetail very well as a partnership. I think Trusty is that wee bit better as a passer. Scales is getting better and better. Scales seems to have a bit more confidence passing the ball around the back 3, the back 4. Tierney, I thought, did a really good job defending. Didn't really get himself forward terribly much, but he defended well. Dane Murray, again, came in beside Trusty. Trusty moved over to left centre-back. Trusty, Scales going to left-back, and then Dane Murray going into right centre-back. I thought Murray looked pretty calm. Donovan looked really good at right back. So I think Trusty actually is. The thing I like about Trusty as well is he's a lot more vocal than Carter Vickers. He seems to be shouting instructions and pointing here, there, and everywhere. So I think I like Trusty as a player. Yes, Hearts have got 3 games against Celtic. Obviously, the next game Hearts have got against Celtic on December the 7th, so a week on Sunday. Going to be at Celtic Park, obviously, so Celtic should, in theory, have a bit of an advantage with that. Then, obviously, the last meeting between Celtic and Hearts will be at Celtic Park, one would have thought as well, after the split. One would expect probably that Rangers are going to, if they do get a bit of solidity and consistency under their new manager, I can certainly see them moving up a wee bit up the league. Their difficulty is going to be whether they're able to reinforce the team in January, or whether more likely they're going to lose a couple of players in January. A lot of rumours that Raskin and Diomande might well be moving on from Rangers in January, which I think might well cause them a lot of problems. Yep, good. Yep, I think Trusty wasn't the most popular player at Celtic, but I think he's actually a good defender. Good thing about Wilfried Nancy, you're quite right. If we're talking about Wilfried Nancy, his English is very good. He's reportedly an inspirational manager, motivates players in different ways. Yep. Certainly, Wessam Abu Ali is one of the players that Nancy reportedly might be signing. We had a wee look at his report card earlier on. Hasn't actually been at Columbus Crew under Wilfried Nancy for terribly long. He only joined them in July, so he's only had 3 months as a player in America. He is Danish by origin. His first 20-odd years of life were in Denmark, a couple of years in Saudi Arabia, and a few months in America. But the rest of his career has been at various different Danish clubs. And his career record in Danish football, Saudi football, and American Soccer League is pretty much a goal every 2 games. So a really good record. And also rumours that Diego Rossi of Columbus Crew is another player that he might bring with him. Yes. He had, I said before, he took over at Montreal from Thierry Henry. He coached Alsa Johnston when Alsa Johnston was still at Montreal. Alsa Johnston was absolutely full of praise for him. Austin Trusty, who obviously was back playing with the American international squad in the last international break, was saying that the players who play in America are very, very positive about Wilfried Nancy as a coach. A lot of very high quality European ex-players who are pundits for television were very praiseworthy for Nancy as well. He speaks English very well. He's got a reputation for being a very, very good coach, a reputation for very quickly passing messages and changes of tactics and stuff on to players, and also has a reputation for being a very, very highly prepared coach as well. Analyses with his expert analyst that's part of his team what the strong points are of the opposition, and then how he can nullify and lessen those strong points, what the weaknesses of the other team are, and then how he can exploit those weaknesses of the opposition. I haven't, to be thoroughly fair, I hadn't really looked at Abu Ali until a couple of days ago. I wasn't aware that he was particularly injury prone, but 242 games in 8 years or so of being of a grown-up adult footballer is pretty decent. About 60 games in Saudi football, so yes, Graham Martin. Rozzy is of all the players I've seen in the 3 or 4 games that I've watched Columbus Crew in highlight form and YouTube highlight reels and stuff. Rozzy, I think, is definitely a player that would suit Celtic really, really well. Very versatile player, good goal scorer. He spent a lot of his time in America, so he's going to have a decent quality of English, which would help him obviously settle in here. He's very aware of the Wilfried Nancy's tactics and formations and so on. He was a key player for them this season because of his versatility to play any of the front 3 positions. Also, I think Abu Ali and Diego Rozzy could equally play in the 4-3-3 that Celtic often play. So I think Rozzy would be a really good signing for Celtic. Haven't really seen enough of Abu Ali to know for definite, but he looks like a player with pace, strength, aerial ability, good anticipation, able to pressurize defenders. Yep, you're quite right. So Pat McLaughlin, yep. It looks like he's had about 30 games per season as an adult player in Denmark, and then obviously in Saudi and now in America. So that certainly at Celtic, it's been one of the problems is we haven't been blooding our young players as young as we used to. Obviously, players like Dalglish and McGrain and McNeil and Connolly and a wee bit later on, obviously Paul McStay all came in, and Tierney all came in their 18s and 19s and into the first team, and were kind of in and out. But Paul McStay came in as an 18-year-old. He practically never left the team after coming in at that age. Kieran Tierney came in about 17, 18, played a bit, then he came back the next season and was a regular constant starter ever after. We've not been so good at bringing in young players and giving them a proper chance to settle in. And it's a wee bit frustrating when watching Scotland playing internationally and Ben Doak is bombing up and down the right wing or bombing up and down the left wing, and thinking, well, he was a player that was for a couple of years in Celtic system and had maybe Ange Postecoglou been a wee bit better at involving him in the team. Maybe Ben Doak would still be a Celtic player now and solving one of the problems that we've got in the wide positions. Although Ben Doak is remarkably injury prone in that he's out again and probably going to be out for a few months with his hamstring problem. Hopefully he's back for the World Cup for Scotland next summer. Yes, no, Jogstein was really good at bringing in players at the 18-19, putting them back into the reserves, bringing them back into the first team, and then, you're quite right, once they got into their 20s, a lot of them had the experience. They'd been playing with the Bobby Lennoxes and the Jimmy Johnstons and the Billy McNeils, etc., for a couple of years, and they were able then to remain being part of the team. Davy Hay, another good example. Danny McGrain, another good example. We just don't seem to be terribly good at the moment of bringing in young players and getting them properly involved. Colby Donovan maybe is the start of us getting back to being good at playing young players, keeping them involved in the first team squad. Because obviously Dane Murray's that wee bit older. I think he's about 22 now rather than being younger. Yep. Yes, it is a frustration that we haven't been very good. Maybe actually probably since the maybe the times of Martin O'Neill the first time around and Gordon Strachan. Around that time onwards, we've not been the best at bringing in and keeping young players involved, but it's been much more patchwork with the McGregors and the Ralstons and the Forrest and the Tierneys, etc. I think you also, people are making a really good point there as well, that Scotland doesn't actually have the highest quality of young footballers in general. Obviously, Lennon Miller, who was at Motherwell, but he's now Udinese, was a very, very good young player who got straight into the Motherwell team at 17. Watson at Kilmarnock's another player who's been a first-team regular at the highest level in Scotland for 2 or 3 years. But in general, Scottish football has not been very good for the top clubs in terms of giving young players a proper go. I think certainly, I think probably Colby Donovan and Anthony Ralston are probably going to be playing a couple of games at a time. I think Donovan's a better option for Celtic at right back than Ralston. I think Ralston's probably going to play a couple of games. Donovan's going to play a few games. Ralston's going to play a couple of games until we get Alistair Johnston back in. Hopefully we get him back in March, April time. But at the moment he's still recovering from his operation, just like Callum Osmond's recovering from his operation. Yes, as I said a wee bit earlier on in the live stream, I think it was a great team performance. I don't think there was any one player who was especially good, but there was lots of players who had maybe their best game of the season for Celtic. Hatate, Engels, Yang. Don't think any of those three has played better for Celtic this season. I thought Donovan, Trusty, Scales had good games. McGregor had a good game. Maeda tried very hard, was part of 2 of the 3 goals for Celtic. I think Tierney did a good job defending, apart from being partly at fault for the Feyenoord goal. Schmeichel had a good game all round. And I think the most important thing was the team spirit was very much there as well. Well, you may well be right. I think Feyenoord are actually a good team. They are currently, from what I gathered, they are second in the Dutch league, so they are a good team. They are having a poor run of form. They are having a particularly poor Europa League. They've had 1 win and 4 defeats so far, so they're much further down the league than we are. I think they're actually they're a good team. They got some actually really good quality players. couple of Japanese internationals on their side, a couple of Dutch internationals on their side, a couple of African country internationals on their side as well. So I think they actually have a lot of quality in their team, but a wee bit like Celtic were under Brendan Rodgers. I don't think they're very motivated. I don't think they're very good as a team, as sort of team spirit, team confidence. I think their confidence is taking a real kicking over the last month, 6 weeks or so. I think they've actually got a lot of talent. At the moment, they're not showing it, a bit like how Celtic were not really showing their talent in August, September, October time. Happily, since Martin O'Neill's come in, the players have been showing much better their talent. Yes, I think there's been wee tweaks here and there to the formation with Maloney and O'Neill and Fotheringham. A lot of people have been suggesting that Fotheringham could be someone very, very useful for Wilfried Nancy to keep as part of the coaching staff. He's got apparently a very, very good reputation as a coach. He's coached in England, he's coached in Germany, he's coached in Scotland. He's not been the most successful manager when he's been a manager, much like Maloney's got a good reputation of being a good coach and a good assistant, but a very poor record once he comes to being the actual man in charge. I would be all for keeping both those two as part of the new coaching setup. Yes. I think Fergus McCann started Celtic on the way to, well, obviously he came in when Celtic were supposedly within a few days of going completely bankrupt, maybe even completely going out of business. Came in, paid off all the debts, big cash injection to help renovate the stadium, bigger stand, etc. Instituted good financial structures and so on the club. He took on the SFA, took on Jim Farry and so on. The nonsense regarding the signing of Giorgio Cadetti happily was a one-off. Yes. No, I think my personal feeling is, and I could well be wrong, obviously, I've got a strong feeling that by Christmas, yes, I think Martin O'Neill has done a remarkable thing. Obviously, it's quite a number of years he'd been out of being actually about football management. I think his last job as a football manager was with Nottingham Forest, which wasn't successful. I think he'd been out of management for about 10 years, something along those lines. I think he's done a remarkable job coming in, turning around Celtic. I think he's obviously added. He already had the best winning percentage record of all time of any Celtic manager. He's obviously had only one defeat. He's won all the other games domestically, and he's now won the game in Europe. It would be tempting for him to go out on a big, important win. I suspect that he's got one more game. I suspect that had it been his last ever game as Celtic's manager tonight, he would have maybe made that announcement in the post-match interviews. Right, okay. 6 years out of management. I couldn't remember off the top of my head. I do remember that his last job was Nottingham Forest, and it had been quite a number of years since he'd been out of management. So he's done a tremendous job coming in to Celtic, and I also think we shouldn't underplay the efforts of Fotheringham and Maloney, McManus, Strachan, Woods, etc. as well. I think they've all fitted in very well with his system. but particularly Maloney and Fotheringham, who seem to take a lot more of the training. O'Neill more just does the motivation, does the tactics, does the team talks, etc., and kind of goes around watching the training in stone. But I think the bulk of the actual training as such at Lennoxtown is done by Maloney and Fotheringham and the other coaches. I have I've been a slightly minority person. I think Yang's got lots of talent. He just is so inconsistent. He is very when he's not playing well, he's very disappointing. I thought he played well tonight. He scored the goal for us. He showed tons and tons of energy, tons and tons of commitment. I think he's a player who thrives on confidence, and I think his confidence under Brendan Rodgers was, for the most part, very low. I think probably the enthusiasm of Martin O'Neill, the confidence building of O'Neill and Fotheringham and Maloney has probably done him the pound of good. I think Yang, unfortunately, is going to be one of these players who's always going to be unpopular with Celtic fans, mostly because he has such poor games when he doesn't play well. Well, hopefully that whoever it was follows through and donates his £50. As I said, the Yang is really frustrating because he's done that sort of thing, ghosting in at the far post to score goals, headers. He scored a couple of goals against Dundee last season, and St Mirren, doing that sort of thing. Scored, I think, 6 goals last season, but he had so many very poor games. And as I say, I think a lot of it comes down to his lack of confidence. If we're talking about Martin O'Neill, I don't think that would be I think that would be a pretty good idea. I think he's probably, as I said, he's got the best winning percentage record of all Celtic managers of all time, even better than Postecoglou, even better than Jock Stein, considerably better than Brendan Rodgers, who's actually 4 or 5 down the list in terms of winning percentage as a Celtic manager when you put his two spells together. O'Neill has increased his percentage lead at the top by a couple more percent. Yes, I have to say that when I read that Yang was starting, I was really rather surprised, but it was a masterstroke. It was a... oh, right. Okay, sorry. Yes, smell the glove, Fergus McCann. I think Fergus McCann probably does deserve some form of honouring at Celtic Park and within the Celtic club. From one or two wee stories I've read about him, he's tended to be a person who has kind of shied away from fame and fortune and that sort of thing. That he came in, put his money into the club, bailed the club out, made it a success, took out a big profit in terms of selling the club on, and then he's kind of retired back into the background. He's not really kept himself involved. So it would be an interesting thing. I have the feeling that Fergus McCann probably wouldn't really want the stand named after him. I don't think he's that sort of person, but you never know. I think he certainly deserves more recognition, because there are a lot of folk who imply that if it wasn't for him back in 1994, there wouldn't be a Celtic anymore, because it was so close to being bankrupted and liquidated, and the feeling was that Celtic wouldn't have been bailed out quite the way that Rangers were in 2012. Yeah, I think there's a very strong argument to that. Obviously, Martin O'Neill, unlike several of Celtic's managers since O'Neill left us, he actually gave us quite a number of seasons. He actually had a sort of a plan to develop the club, take the club forward. He also did a wee bit of renovating and rotating the squad, rebuilding the squad, adding players here and there. Problem, I think, with Rodgers the first time and the second time, and Postecoglou, was that they were only really at the club for two to three seasons. There wasn't any real sort of continuity in building the club up and up and up. And I think that's actually something that Celtic could do with, is having a continuity of one coach, one head coach, one manager for let's say 5 years, to really keep the squad building and building, adding players, selling players, adding players, selling players, and building the club up and up and up, and also bringing through more and more of the academy players and really talented Scottish and Irish and players into the club as well, and to keep the club progressing. Hopefully, Martin, Wilfried Nancy is that sort of manager, that he will stay at Celtic for several seasons and build the club up and up and up. Although I think probably if he does do well, he's going to probably move on to France or down south, but hopefully I'm wrong. Good day to you, Bonnie 5 from Australia. Not quite sure what time of day it is in Australia, but it's probably about 12 hours different from us. So you're probably getting towards late morning lunchtime over there. Suspect that the weather with you is a million times better than it is with me, raining and windy and so on. Certainly, you're quite right. I think Fergus McCann came in and he had a very clear plan of what he was going to do, how he was going to spend the money, and I think he pretty much everything went to his plan. He paid off all the debts. He made Celtic a bigger, better club. He installed a very good financial model, a model that's been used ever since, and he left the club having made a nice big profit, but not a gigantic profit out of the club. And he's kind of gone back into certainly don't know whether your girl Bonnie 5 also follows cricket, but I was watching the England cricket a couple of days ago, and it looked incredibly hot over in Australia, and liable to get hotter and hotter. Yes, no, I think Fergus McCann did an awful lot of good things for Celtic. As I say, he confronted the SFA and Jim Farry and people like that, and he broke down a lot of the barriers and biases and yes, I well, I didn't say he didn't make a profit out of the club, but as I said, my readings of stuff from around that time was, and several Celtic people who were involved with the club at that time, was that the club was about to go out of business, could have been completely wiped off the map, could have gone the way that like Third Lanark and Adrianins and Clydebank and Gretna, etc., when IE completely gone into anonymity. Maybe there would have been a strong enough force in Scottish football in general that Celtic would have been bailed out, much the same that Rangers were in 2012. I have a feeling that they wouldn't have had such an easy ride as Rangers did through the courts and the tax systems and various different things. But happily, Fergus McCann put his money where his mouth was, bailed out the club, rebuilt it, and installed a very good structure, and then moved on with £30 million for selling the club. Certainly selling the club nowadays would be take a considerable amount of money to buy the club now. Reportedly, Celtic as a football club is worth £450 million. When you put together all the training facilities, Barrowfield, Lennoxtown, the stadium, the players, all the sort of the merchandising things, the shops, the online stuff, reportedly Celtic as a football club is worth £450 million. So obviously, if anybody wanted to buy the club from Fergus McCann and other shareholders, you would need several hundred million at least to buy the club. And don't get the feeling that Dermot Desmond or the Lindell Train people are intending to sell their big shares of the club at any time soon. Lindell Train seem to have sold a few of their shares off, although that could have been. Although looking at the various different things from the financial statement, Lindell Train's got 3 different parts of their company are invested in Celtic, so they seem to have, 3 different investment arms in Celtic. I think getting Martin O'Neill back to the club was a masterstroke. Now, I know that Dermot Desmond's not terribly popular with a lot of people, understandably, but according to Martin O'Neill, he was the factor that brought O'Neill to the club in 2000, and he was the factor that brought O'Neill back to the club in 2025. It was Desmond that got him the job in the first place and and asked him to do the job this time. And I think actually O'Neill, as it's turned out, probably couldn't have gone much better. I think maybe a draw against Midtjylland in that European game, and I don't think you could fault Martin O'Neill otherwise. He's won all the league games so far. He won the League Cup semi-final against Rangers, and as Clashman Numpty said, he didn't. I was sceptical about O'Neill because he'd not been in football management for 6 years or whatever it was. He obviously kept himself involved being a pundit for ITV and TNT and Sky and everybody else. But he hadn't really been involved in football hands-on for a long time. And I think he's done a great job. And I think his bringing in of Fotheringham and Maloney also was a really good idea as well. I think it's really worked really well. I think he obviously within most Celtic supporters and the board members and the executives, he already knew a lot of them to a greater or lesser extent. He'd worked obviously with Dermot Desmond in the past, Lawwell in the past. I think Nicholson was at the club in a different role towards the end of that time, or maybe just a wee bit later. Um, some of the other long-standing directors at the club, again, would have worked with O'Neill when he's here the first time around, and O'Neill has been sort of back and forward for Celtic events and fan things and prize givings and player of the season stuff. I think I don't. Sean Maloney possibly was the other person who might have been asked to be the caretaker manager, given the fact that Neil Lennon was already managing Dunfermline, Scott Brown was managing Ayr, Maloney was within our club already, so I think he was the other person that might well have been promoted to be the caretaker manager. I think getting in Martin O'Neill was a masterstroke, and it's worked out really, really well. I think I couldn't agree. I think that's a really, really good point, Roy Jacobson. He's done well, and it's been very appreciated. I think he's put Celtic back on an even keel. He's given all the players confidence. He's told them that they're winners, that they're champion players. He's convinced them that they are good players. I think a lot of players under Brendan Rodgers for those couple of months. I think also leading into the last month of the transfer window, Rodgers was forever saying the squad was terrible, there was no quality. And if I was a player, I would get more and more demoralised, less and less confidence, because your manager's not speaking for you, he's not supporting you. Whether he was supporting the players in training and behind the scenes, I don't know, but certainly in public he was pretty much doing them down. And certainly for many weeks around the transfer window and the month after, Celtic had no confidence and no team spirit and no cohesion. But totally agree, Roy Jacobson. Given the fact that Martin O'Neill's 73, there's no real long-term plan for him to stay at Celtic for long. Wilfried Nancy, assuming that he is the one who's going to come in tomorrow or the day after, he's 48. He's got 10, 15 years at least of being a top-level coach at a relatively young age. I think you're entirely right. Roy Hodgson and Bobby Robson both carried on to older age than O'Neill is at 73. I think both Bobby Robson and Roy Hodgson had a desire to keep on going. I think O'Neill, having had 6 years out of management, was enjoying doing the media stuff, enjoying doing the TV stuff, doing his public speaking events, going to Celtic fan groups and doing theatre shows and stuff for Celtic fans and doing stuff with ex-Celtic players. I think he was enjoying that side of things. I think he was enjoying being a retired man. I don't think he had quite the drive that Hodgson and Robson did to keep on going to an old age. I guess also Alex Ferguson must have been well into his 60s when he left the Man United job for the last time. Anyway, so personally I think at 73, Martin O'Neill, good for a couple of months as Celtic's manager, but in terms of taking the club actually further and further forward, I think we need a young manager, hopefully a manager who stays at the club for 4 or 5 years or more and has initial success and then builds on that, and over the next couple of years gets Celtic deeper into European competitions while still being the number one team in Scotland. Yes, there's absolutely thousands and thousands and thousands of videos on YouTube about Celtic, about football, about the good old days, before football became all scientific. Yes, both of those were managers ages ago that were linked to us. I think obviously O'Neill was a very successful manager first time around, leading into Gordon Strachan. He again wasn't the most popular Celtic manager, but he did bring Celtic success domestically and some success in European competitions. Got Celtic close a couple of times to making real progress in Europe. Didn't quite have the same strength of squad in some ways that Martin O'Neill had the previous seasons, but I think Strachan did a fine job for a few years. I think, unfortunately, there's just so much money in all the other leagues in Europe that Celtic and a lot of countries, a lot of clubs in a lot of countries. Joe Kinnear and Olsen were both Wimbledon managers. Olsen wasn't very successful at Wimbledon. Joe Kinnear was very successful at Wimbledon, but not very successful anywhere else. I don't really see either of them being able to do a good job at all at Celtic. I think we got some O'Neill and Strachan were good managers. Neil Lennon had a pretty decent success, or Rodgers obviously won a ton of trophies for Celtic. Certainly first time around, the competition for Celtic in Scotland wasn't terribly good, and you can maybe even say the competition for Celtic the second time around under Rodgers wasn't as strong as it could have been. Yep. So they managed Wimbledon. Wimbledon became Milton Keynes Dons when they moved it from Wimbledon to Milton Keynes, and then a team was then set up where the original Wimbledon had been in their stadium and stuff. So yes. Yes, so Wimbledon became Milton Keynes Dons, and then another team took on the Wimbledon mantle. So Celtic's next game is coming up, fortunately or unfortunately, very soon. I guess they will be having a wee celebration in Rotterdam and then flying back to land in Glasgow early tomorrow morning, or even landing in Glasgow through the night. They'll have a rest day on Friday, and then they'll be back in training on Saturday, and then they're playing against Hibs on Sunday. It's a lunchtime kickoff, which I never like kickoffs at 12 noon on a Sunday for a variety of reasons, but I don't think Celtic do quite so well in 12 o'clock kickoffs on a Sunday away from home. Hopefully Celtic get themselves up and ready and going nice and quickly, get on top of Hibs nice and quickly. I think that was one of the things, although we did give away a goal in the 11th minute, I think actually Celtic started the game very brightly tonight against Feyenoord, which allowed them, having gone 1-0 down, to already have got themselves going. it's been a big contrast this season from last season. Celtic used to, under Ange Postecoglou, and then not too badly under Brendan Rodgers, used to make really, really good starts to the game. But this season, Celtic have hardly scored a goal in the first half hour. So Yang scoring Celtic's first goal around about the 30th minute was actually a really quite a rare thing for Celtic to have scored in the first half an hour. Yeah. Yes, I don't, quite right, Paul McGuire. I don't like 12 o'clock kickoffs on a Sunday. I dare say it's not ideal if you're travelling from Ireland or England or further afield in Scotland to get to an away game for 12 noon. Not too bad if you're travelling from central Scotland or Glasgow, but certainly if you're travelling from further afield in England or from Ireland or Northern Ireland, it's going to be really difficult to get there without having come the night before. And see, I don't think Celtic do terribly well as a team so early on a Sunday. Yep. I think 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 5 o'clock. Wasn't massively keen on the 8 p.m. kickoff last Saturday against St Mirren. Seemed awfully late in the day for a game on a Saturday. I think probably in the near future, we'll be having games live on TV at 3 o'clock on a Saturday. I know that for years and years and years that's been kind of banned, but I think given the fact that TV companies these days just have so much power, I'm pretty sure the next time Sky negotiate a contract, be it for the English Premier League or for the Scottish Premier League and Scottish football, that 3 o'clock kickoffs on a Saturday on TV will just become part of the norm. But I guess I see what you're saying, Pat McLaughlin, that you like them. You like 3 o'clocks. Sorry, 8 o'clocks on a Saturday and 12 o'clock on a Sunday. Each to their own. It's just my personal opinion. 12 o'clock on a Sunday just seems too early in the day for me. Although I will be watching it from home, and 8 o'clock on a Saturday evening, it seemed I was waiting all day for the kickoff. I would personally think if I was a football player, waiting all day to play an 8 p.m. game on a Saturday or being up and ready to play a game on a Sunday at 12 noon, particularly if you're having to travel or stay away overnight in a hotel, having in Celtic's case been away on Wednesday to Rotterdam and then back back very early on Friday morning, or back at breakfast time on Friday morning, depending on what Celtic do in terms of their flights. Yes, you make a really good point. There are much bigger problems in the world than playing at a certain time of day. And you're quite right. We should be happy for what we've got. We should be happy for the fact that we're in the cup final on December the 14th against St Mirren. We should be happy that we've narrowed the gap quite considerably on Hearts. If one or two results went our way, we win the game in hand, we could be topping the table by early December. So as I was saying a wee bit earlier on, I think in terms of the game against Hibs, the only person only person that looked like he might be injured is Colby Donovan. Looked like everybody else got through the game completely fine. Didn't look like Donovan was particularly badly injured. Just looked like he maybe had been kicked on the foot or stamped on the foot over on the far touchline. He was a wee bit limping after that. Hopefully, just a bit of soft tissue injury, a bit of bruising, and he'll be fine for Sunday. So I think he actually is the kind of player that we need, given his ability to defend, but also his ability to get forward and create a bit of width and overlap on the right hand side, particularly if we persist with McCowan out on the right. James Forrest is still out. It wasn't Martin O'Neill in his last press conference, which kind of got over hijacked by other things, didn't really specify how long that Forrest was going to be out for. O'Neill said obviously that Sirachi and Iheanacho were coming back into training. He then said on the pre-match press conference the evening before tonight's game that Iheanacho and Sirachi were going to be there or thereabouts in terms of the matchday squad. Iheanacho made it onto the bench. Happily didn't have to play. I'd be surprised that if Iheanacho played on Sunday, other than as a substitute. One option might be to play Maeda out on the wing again rather than through the middle against Hibs. Bring back Kenny through the middle. But there was no mention of Forrest being back into training. He wasn't on the bench tonight, so I would suspect that Forrest won't be around on Saturday. I think Yang deserves another go. He had a good game tonight. Yep, quite right. Forrest, unfortunately, over the last several seasons, has been in and out hard and played hardly at all. It's slightly frustrating because he just looked like he was starting to come into some form, and then he got himself injured, which has also kind of been the way of the world for James Forrest the last 5 years or so. And you're entirely right, Smell the Glove. I think it's going to be one of these things where Celtic do need all their fit players, and so we could get Forrest back that bit quicker. That would be ideal. It's good that we seem to have Iheanacho and Sirachi there or thereabouts. It's good that we seem to have got through tonight's game without any major injuries, maybe a minor one for Donovan that causes him to be out on Sunday but back for Wednesday against Dundee. I think there is, you're quite right, I think it's going to be all hands to the deck. Having players maybe playing slightly out of position, playing half a game here and there, playing off the bench sometimes. Still a bit worrying that Kieran Tierney doesn't seem to be able to give Celtic a full 90 minutes. Didn't think, actually, personally, tonight his form or performance was taking a dip in that last half an hour or so of the game. But it's only 2 games in a row when he's come off with 20, 30 minutes to play, as was the case against St Mirren. He got taken off with Murray going on and Scales moving over. So it's a wee bit disappointing because he was getting into playing a couple of games for the full 90 minutes. He seems to regress back to playing 60, 70. Well, if James Forrest was back for March, April time, I think that could be a very important time. If all goes to plan, we'll still be in the Scottish Cup, quarterfinals, semi-finals, etc. There'll be the games are always that bit more intense when it does come to the post-split 6 and 6 bits. So if we did get him back for that time, that'd be great. Rumoured that Alistair Johnson should be back by about that time. Callum Osman's thought to be back probably for April time. So the more fit players that Celtic have, the better. Yes, I think Iheanacho has shown a pretty good attitude since he came to Celtic. He obviously been a bit ring rusty, hadn't played an awful lot of football since around about May time. He played some of the pre-season games over in Spain, but he hadn't played a sort of first-team football game for a long time. He had a poor time at Middlesbrough on loan, played a game or two for Nigeria, and then he had a long spell where he wasn't playing at all in first-team football. And to be fair to James Forrest, in Rodgers' first season, Forrest actually was an important player for us around the time that he eventually got himself fit in the 23-24 season, having spent quite a bit of time out of the team. He came sort of back in March time, and Celtic pretty much won every game until the end of the season. In the 23-24 season, I think after we lost to Hearts 2-0 in the game that was spoiled by John Beaton on VAR sending off Yang and then giving that awful penalty against Tomoki Iwata. I think from that point onwards, Celtic didn't lose again all season, and James Forrest was a big factor in Celtic's good, consistent form for the rest of that season. So if we do get him back, I think he is a useful player for us coming off the bench. I think he would fit into the Wilfried Nancy system, in that he could play as one of a sort of wing back role potentially. He's played that a few times for Celtic. Yep. So after that Hearts game that we lost, controversially, we didn't lose again. We won every game except for the game we drew against Rangers. We came through to win the cup final. We powered through to win the Scottish Premiership, and ended up winning the double that season. There's a lot of people suggesting that Martin O'Neill should get for sentimental reasons should get to do the League Cup final. I think for sentimental reasons that makes a lot of sense, but for footballing reasons, I think the sooner we get in a permanent manager, the better. Simply for the fact that I think Celtic do need to reinforce the team, upgrade the team in the January window, and the same again in the summer window of 2026. And the sooner we get in a brand new manager with brand new ideas and a list of players that he wants the club to go after, the better. So for that reason, if we get in Nancy at the start of December, that gives them a whole month to prepare the transfer window, and it gives them a whole month or so of the transfer window to remodel the club. Not so much for this season, but for next season. Yep, I would definitely keep. I would definitely keep Martin O'Neill at the club. Having him as a chairman, chairman or the chief executive, given the complexity of that job, it's not a goer. Also, the fact that chief executive officer and chairman have to be around the club all the time. They can't be down in London and only at the club now and again. Both those jobs are very intensive, lots and lots of hours, working on weekends as well, off like 7 days a week. So, yep. Director of football would be a grand. My personal feeling is what would be the best role for Martin O'Neill would be some form of club ambassador or a actually added to the board with a role on the board to be the person overseeing the players, overseeing recruitment, overseeing scouting, overseeing improving the club's reputation, etc., and attracting players to the club. Yes, I think from yes, Pat McLaughlin. I think what I was about to say is I think also Martin O'Neill is quite a family man. I think he has a strong family life down based in London. So if he was going to do any intensive role at Celtic, like a director of football, a chief executive officer, a chairman, he would have to be in Glasgow and going all around the world on a very, very regular basis. And I don't see him wanting to be going all around the world on a really regular basis. Yep. Sligo Boy, he came in as an interim manager, kind of as a favour to Dermot Desmond and also as a thank you to the club. I think he's done a brilliant job in so many ways turning around the club. I think he's revitalised the club. He's got the players playing together, playing for each other. I personally think a director of football job probably requires you to be at the club a lot more. If there's a way of doing it in an adapted fashion or a reduced fashion as a remote person, doing it over the phone, doing it with video links, doing it with one visit per week, etc. I think that would be a definite factor. Anyway, my understanding is that some of the members of the board actually are do an awful lot. Whether they do the work well or not is a different matter, but they are in at the club on a very regular basis. They are in the club 7 days a week, long hours, etc. Whether they're doing their job well enough is a different matter, but I think their time commitment, Lawwell, Nicholson, Mackay, etc., is a lot towards Celtic, but maybe their efficiency of their job isn't as good as it should be. Yes, I think there are very, very few people who are associated with Celtic who would have a bad word to say about Martin O'Neill. That's the reason I think that he might be a really good person to be an ambassador on the board, some form of player recruitment, a specialist as a liaison or a link between the board and the recruitment department, the scouting department. I think he also could be a person who could really sell the club to players in terms of how it's going to develop their career and move them on, move their career up the ladder and stuff. You have every right to your opinion. I don't think the phrase "hated by every single fan" is true. I think there's an awful lot of fans, the silent majority, the ones who watch the games on TV. They support Celtic on TV, online, on the radio, through podcasts, etc. I don't think that I think there's there is a significant number of Celtic fans who do hate the board. I think there's a very significant number of fans who just want Celtic to keep on winning, keep on being successful, keep on being a club with lots and lots of money. And so I'm not sure about every single fan hating the board. I think Celtic having a lot of money in the bank is very good. Remembering also that we are going to, because of Scotland's coefficient being poor, we're not going to have such a great chance of being in the Champions League as we used to have. And so having a bit of extra cash in the bank is going to come in very, very useful. Because obviously this season we're not in the Champions League, so that's 20-30 million pounds that would have been in the bank, not in the bank. It's going to be difficult next season to get into the Champions League, simply because we're going to have to go through 2 or 3 rounds of qualifying, and then a lot of those qualifying rounds are going to be early in the summer, so straight after the World Cup. A lot of players are going to come back from the World Cup straight into qualifiers in Gibraltar or in Slovenia or whatever it is. One of the problems with also is those early season summer qualifiers for the Champions League is that other countries, their league is halfway 2/3 finished. That was the case, obviously, with us taking on Kairat Almaty. They were about 2/3 of the way through their season. They were top of their league in their country, playing against Celtic, who were 2 or 3 games into their proper season. Kairat Almaty had already had, I think, 3 rounds of qualifying that they'd come through before they played us, but they'd also had about 30 games or so in domestic football, so they were actually fully fit. They'd got their team very well structured. They'd got used to each other, while Celtic were still putting together their squad and learning each other as well. And I think Celtic will have a more difficult job for the next 2 or 3 years of getting into the Champions League. So again, having that bit of extra money in the bank is going to be useful. But each to their own. I think my personal feeling is that Celtic should be looking forwards, and I think my personal feeling is Celtic should be looking forwards. I think fighting against the board is counterproductive. Hopefully, Wilfried Nancy can keep up this good spirit within the players and within the team. It certainly fell under Brendan Rodgers as the head coach. A lot of the players were really, really struggling for confidence. That all the problems off the pitch were really affecting them. That seems to have turned around. So my personal feeling is, especially now that we're getting a brand new manager, if all the stories are true, we should start looking forwards, being happy that we're within a good chance now of progressing to the knockout stage of the Europa League. We're in the cup final in 2 weeks' time. We are possibly a couple of games away from going top of the league again in Scotland. I certainly think by the end of 2025, we'll be back top of the table with a bit of a gap over Rangers and Hearts and Hibs and so on. So I think all these things are positive. I think we should be nice and positive about the transfer window going well, that Wilfried Nancy is going to get the club going forward, back playing really good football. Football life, 1595. Everyone's entitled to their opinion. I wasn't at the AGM. I've read lots and lots of stories about the AGM. The AGM from both sides of the dispute of the fights. I think it was a disaster for all the fan groups. It was a disaster for the board members. It was a disaster for the executives. I think it's a disaster all round, and I think nobody has won. Everybody has lost. The good thing is the players seem to have managed to keep on going forward, playing together as a team, and it did appear it did appear that the travelling couple of thousand fans, however much it was, really supported Celtic towards a victory today, and I think that's the most important thing, personally. Yep, I'm all for opinions, and I'm all for everybody having rights to share their opinions. I don't see anybody's opinion as right or wrong. All I've ever asked on the channel, be it through the comment section or the live streams, is that people are polite, respectful, allow everybody to have their say, that there's no rude words, there's no insults, there's no nastiness, because we, after all, are all Celtic fans. We all want Celtic to be the best possible club that it can be. And I think we should all respect each other and be polite to each other. And my personal feeling is we need to keep on looking forwards. I think certainly with everything in history, you can learn from history. You can learn from things going wrong in the past. Reportedly, there have been changes behind the scenes in terms of scouting and recruiting and various different things, because the level of communication from Nicholson and the other executives and board members is very, very poor. We don't know what those changes are, but the stories are I was born in 1967, so in the 70s, I would have been for the most part. I was for the whole of the 70s. I was at primary school, and then obviously in the early 80s went to high school. The only reason I'm against rude words and bad words is that YouTube can shut the channel down, and that is counterproductive for these sorts of forums. It can affect all kinds of things with the channel if there is a lot of swear words and rude words, etc. So that's why if there's any comments in the comment section that have got swear words or bad words or things that might be illegal, I can't put them on the screen. So if you want to use swear words in the comment section, it's fine. But I need to avoid putting any swear words or anything potentially libelous or defamatory on the screen, simply to protect the channel. So that's the only reason. So if you do use swear words in the comment section, I can't put it up on the screen. And one of the reasons for live streams is that people get to get their opinions, their thoughts, their theories. Yes, I fully agree with you. Football is life. 1595. I am told by people who were there that the videos that they showed were talking about mistakes that they've made, etc. I have said in all the live streams I've ever done, which is about 15 now, that Celtic need to massively improve their communication. I've said 1,000 times on these live streams, for those who've been on all the live streams at Celtic, that Nicholson, Mackay, Lawwell, Tidsdale, all these people should be doing press conferences, interviews, TV things on a weekly basis, that there should be some Celtic spokesperson, be it Nicholson or someone in Nicholson's office, who or every couple of days is on television, on Celtic TV, on Sky, on BBC, whatever, telling the fans what's going on behind the scenes to the best of what they can within all the rules and regulations and laws. Bad is a bad word, but it's not a bad word. Bad is not a bad word, so I can put bad up on the screen. You're entirely right, Paul McGuire. So you've been on the channel right from the start of the channel 2 and a bit years ago. I've been a long-standing viewer, subscriber, and again, because your comments are family friendly, I can put them up on the screen. It's a really good question. I think this is he actually played, I thought, for last season for Celtic. He played well for most of the season last year. He kept himself fit for most of last season, right to the very, very end. Obviously, he got injured in the Aberdeen game, missed the last couple of games of the season. He's been pretty rubbish all season. I think today was kind of like the old Rio Hatate. He seemed to be playing a wee bit more further advanced, still dropping back to help Engels and McGregor a bit deeper in midfield, but he seemed to have a bit more of an advanced role. The question also is whether Rio Hatate wants to stay at Celtic past this winter. A lot of stories were suggesting that Rio Hatate wanted away during the summer. That got scuppered by the fact that he'd been injured at the end of last season, which meant he missed most of the pre-season training. Really only came into Celtic the last couple of weeks of pre-season, just before we started playing the first games of the season. I think it's part of the reason that both he and Maeda didn't really start the season terribly well for Celtic. Neither of them really has been anywhere near their best all season. But I think Hatate, as he showed today, when he's playing well, can be a very, very important player for Celtic. I think also we saw the best of Arnie Engels today as well. He seemed again to be a wee bit of a deeper role. He did a lot of breaking up of play. I think he helped McGregor a lot. I think if this is the Rio Hatate we're going to get for the rest of the season, I'll be very, very happy for him to stay. The problem is I'm not convinced he's going to keep on playing that well for the rest of the season. One of the problems that both Maeda and Hatate have got if they do want away from Celtic in the transfer window in January is they need to show some form. Otherwise, no one's going to want to buy them. It certainly was a pretty conventional back four. Donovan did get forward a bit from right back. Tierney didn't really get forward from left back. Not massively sure that playing Luke McCowan as a right winger works terribly well. I think Kieran Tierney is going to be a very good player for Celtic for the next 2 or 3 seasons. My only worry with Kieran Tierney is that we don't seem to be able to get 90 minutes out of him on a regular basis. He did play a couple of games, 90 minutes, but the last couple of games have been 60, 70 minutes. But I think Kieran Tierney is going to be an important player for Celtic. I think, however, we do need to have probably a good couple of a really good backup left back, and a bit of flexibility of other players who can play left back if required. Luckily, at the moment, we do have Liam Scales, who's pretty decent at left back. Austin Trusty can play at left back. Callum McGregor has played left back a few times for Celtic as more as an emergency. But I do think if Tierney's going to have fitness problems and not able to play 90 minutes on a regular basis, I think we do need to get someone like Sirachi. Oops. My understanding from the little bits of that I've followed of Greg Taylor was he wasn't doing especially well in Greek football. I haven't actually bothered to check just recently for Greg Taylor, but the first couple of months or so he was, I'm told, struggling to get a regular first team game. Obviously, some other players who left the club, Gustav Lagerbielke has had a very, very successful time since he left the club. Luis Palma, who's on loan at Lech Poznan, has had a very, very successful time in Polish football. Marco Tilio has been a wee bit inconsistent. He's had some very good games in Austria, a couple of poor games in Austria. My understanding was that Taylor hadn't really properly settled down into yes. Good point. I was very impressed with Hayato Inamura in the pre-season. I thought he played fine against Livingston. I thought he shows a lot of ability to pass, a lot of ability to get himself forward. I think he actually is a good player. He clearly was never going to get a chance to play first-team football under Brendan Rodgers. Neither was Shin Yamada. Neither Inamura nor Yamada's really had much of a chance under Martin O'Neill either. Yes. No, I was just saying, well, obviously Taylor's away full-time as well. I was just saying that Tilio's away to Austria Vienna on a full-time deal. I just was saying his performances for Austria Vienna have been a wee bit in and out. Someone was asking about Greg Taylor. He's obviously away permanently as well. He's been rather erratic there. Lagerbielke, he's away permanently too. He's got himself back into the Swedish international side. And he's building up a very good reputation. Stories are that Lech Poznan might well struggle to pay the transfer fee for Luis Palma, so he might be back at Celtic next season. Actually, the way that Luis Palma is playing for Lech Poznan would fit in really well with the main system that Wilfried Nancy uses of this attacking midfielder player. Luis Palma didn't have an awful lot of pace, but he was actually generally quite good at passing and crossing and shooting, and he certainly is showing that in Polish football. I think the decision of anybody to buy merchandise, buy food, etc. at Celtic Park, buy strips and tracksuits and shorts and socks and beer mugs, etc. All these things is entirely up to the choice of the player, of the fan. One of my worries about that sort of thing is, although it would hurt Celtic for there to be a lack of revenue coming in through merchandising and food and drink, etc., It also does affect lots and lots and lots of local businesses, Scottish businesses. A lot of local firms rely on selling food, drink, coffee, etc. to Celtic for Celtic's food and drink company to sell. Obviously, Celtic's got quite a number of superstores and online stuff, employing staff. There's other merchandising. So my worry about not buying merchandise and not buying food and drink at Celtic Park is it's going to mean people are going to lose their jobs as well. The people, and there's quite a number of local businesses who support other. So there are quite a number of football clubs around Scotland who've fallen on hard times, and it's had a knock-on effect on a lot of local businesses. But everybody is fully entitled to make their own decisions regarding what they spend their money on. One of my worries is that if Celtic aren't buying food and drink, and then they don't have as many people buying food and drink at Celtic Park, it's going to mean a lot of the food and drink kiosks get shut down. It's going to mean a lot of people who are on 0-hour contracts lose their job, and a lot of local merchants, a lot of local food companies who sell food to Celtic for Celtic to sell is all going to fall in hard times as well. So, but it's everybody's choice to do what everybody wants to do. Yeah, I think Lagerbielke was a good player. He was a good player in Swedish football. He was a good player when he went on loan to 20 Enschede in Holland, and he's been really good since he got a permanent transfer away from the club. Nawrocki's been a wee bit unlucky with injuries and stuff. I think he's just starting to get some starts for Hanover now. Very much Lewis Palmer fell out of favour at Celtic under Rodgers. He's been reborn in Polish football. Yes, I read all the things that people. I think Ross Desmond made a massive mistake with his all the nasty things he said about the fans, but then the fans have been saying nasty things about him and about Nicholson and Lawwell. So I think everybody has been saying not nice things about each other, but I thought what Ross Desmond said was very, very counterproductive. I thought all the protesting and noise and disruption at the AGM, I think that was counterproductive. And I think everybody at the AGM lost. Both sides lost. And all Celtic's fans lost. Celtic's a football club lost. Which is why I would be much happier in the live streams concentrating on the players, the managers, the tournaments, the results, etc. Because I actually know about, I feel I know about these things, having supported for 50 years. It's extremely clear with all the votes at the AGM. Everything was 98% to 2%. There's nothing much that we can do as fans, given the way that Celtic is structured in terms of some really, really big, rich shareholders having an awful lot of power to mould the club. So I think, personally, I would get on with management. My personal thing is, but people can do what they like, would be getting on with supporting the club, getting on with cheering the club on, and also having friendly, fun debates and chats regarding moving the club forward, new manager, what players we can try and bring in during the transfer window, which players Celtic's got currently we can build a team around. I think in the long run, in the next couple of seasons, we're really going to have to make plans to replace Callum McGregor. We're obviously going to have to make plans in similar frame to replace Kieran Tierney as well. We're going to have to improve replace Dyson Maeda very shortly. So why I think it would be fun more to speculate about who Wilfried Nancy is going to bring in, what players we've seen playing for other clubs, other leagues, other countries that could fit in at Celtic. I completely agree that fan involvement is massively important at a football club, but I think fans need to work with the people who've got all the power, all the shares, all the money. That you've got to work with them, not work against them. That's my personal feeling, and obviously that works in any team, any organisation. Everybody working together, pushing and pulling in the right direction. All these things makes a club successful. Someone was talking a wee bit earlier on about the AFC Wimbledon, who were resurrected out of the old Wimbledon club. They are a perfect example of a bunch of fans, a bunch of players, and financial people who all work together to resurrect that club and get it into the league. And there's lots and lots of examples of fans and boards and players and coaches and managers all working together to move their club forward. My personal feeling is that fan involvement is massively important, but fan involvement needs to work with the people who've got the money, got the power, etc. Yep. I think certainly CCV this season has been, obviously he's missed since he actually signed for Celtic. He's missed a lot of time through injuries, had a lot of recurring injuries. I have a feeling that he probably wasn't 100% fit all season. He had knee surgery in the summertime. He was late back into training. Didn't really have much of a pre-season, straight into first game of the season against St Mirren. He never really quite hit the heights that Cameron Carter-Vickers used to hit, and Trusty and Scales definitely have been better centre-backs for Celtic this season than Carter-Vickers was. Carter-Vickers won't be back again for Celtic at all in 25-26. I would expect that in the winter transfer window, some form of central defender is going to get brought in by Wilfried Nancy, particularly if that central defender is good at passing, because at Columbus Crew, certainly, he was very keen for his centre-backs to be able to pass. And so sort of a hybrid centre-backs or defensive midfielder type of player, a wee bit like Nir Beaton was for us, or Tomoki Iwata was for us as well, might be really useful. Because I think actually in Trusty and Scales, we've got two really good central defenders. Murray and Tierney can both play central defence for us. There's a theory also that Alistair Johnston at 5'11" could play in a central defence alongside a couple of the other players that Celtic's got at the moment. Of course, he won't be back for quite a while. Yes, that's kind of what I was trying to say regarding Dyson Maeda and Rio Itati, and Yang for that matter, is that it could be difficult selling those players on. There does seem to be a market for Dyson Maeda. There are reportedly 2 or 3 English Premier League sides that want to sign Dyson Maeda in January. Just he's not really been in terribly good form at all for Celtic this season. And I dare say there's going to be less people wanting him this transfer window than was the case in the summer transfer window. I'm not sure many people are queuing up to sign Rio Hatate, so it's actually kind of in their interest, both Maeda and Hatate, if they want away in January, for them to have a good November or good December. And there will be a lot of games for them both to play in December to get themselves back in the shop window. Yes, I think the expectation would be that we would get somewhere in the high single figures million, so something like 7, 8, 9, 10 million for Rio Hatate. We did, after all, get £10 million for Kyogo. I think we were quite lucky to get £10 million for Kyogo, given the fact he wasn't having the best season for Celtic at the time. He was past 30. He's obviously not had a good time either at Rennes or now that he's gone to Birmingham. So I think it was good business to get 10 million for Kyogo. Of course, we should have actually got another first choice, good quality striker in to replace him last winter, but we didn't. I think we'd probably be looking for something £20 million plus for Dyson Maeda. I'm pretty sure that Leeds and Everton would be happy to pay that much money for Dyson Maeda. So I think selling Dyson Maeda shouldn't be too much of a problem. Selling. Fair enough. Everybody to their opinion. Yeah. He certainly had a poor time at Rennes. He's had a poor time at Birmingham. He's completely dropped out of all kind of international reckoning with Japan. I think personally, had he stayed at Celtic, he probably would have been on the fringes of the Japanese World Cup squad. Does look like Dyson Maeda will be part of Japan's squad there. Doesn't look like Rio Hatate will be. Well, it was actually good for a game to not actually be stop-start with VAR for a change. There's been far too much VAR controversies and mistakes just recently. It does actually make it much more difficult to celebrate a goal, and that you're always convinced that something that's going to get called back for offside. I had a horrible feeling when Benjamin Negrin scored the third goal for Celtic that they were going to say that Dyson Maeda was offside at some point in the lead up to the goal. Happily, that wasn't the case. The other bizarre thing was that Luke McCowan looked an absolute million miles offside when he hit the bar from 2 yards out. But the story was that apparently he would have been given onside had he scored. Somehow he managed to hit the bar from 2 yards. But he looked like he was a mile offside. Yep. So the offside flag. So yes, McCowan had hit the bar. Then the ball had actually rebounded, and then someone shot the ball past the post. Then the flag went up. The story was, however, that had VAR looked at had McCowan scored, which he didn't do, he would have been given onside. It didn't look like he was onside. Even on the replay, it looked like he was offside. But someone was saying that it was a Feyenoord player who touched the ball last. So, yeah. I saw the game, saw the shot obviously live, and I saw one replay, and I didn't actually pick up on the fact that it come off a defender. But that's what the people in the studio said anyway. Yes. I think Engels obviously is a player that wasn't intending staying at Celtic for more than 2 or 3 seasons. He obviously had a pretty good season last season without being really brilliant. He's had a really pretty disappointing season. I think he's a player with a lot of ability. I think he probably maybe wasn't always played in the best position under Brendan Rodgers. He's kind of maybe slightly found a better position in the Martin O'Neill and Sean Maloney system. I think he's a player who would fit in really well to the way that Wilfried Nancy likes playing football. I think McGregor will fit in really well with the Wilfried Nancy system as well. Sirachi and Johnston, Donovan, I think they'll also will fit in if we wanted to have overlapping fullbacks, wingbacks. I think we've actually got a lot of players who would fit the way that Wilfried Nancy likes to start his teams. Yep. Yeah, it was around about the 2nd minute or so that 6th minute. It was the 6th minute that Luke McCowan managed to hit the bar from 2 yards out. He was flagged for offside, but there are lots of the story was he was onside, not offside, so he should have. Yep. So you're entirely right. You've voiced what happened really well, far better than I can. He certainly seemed to be much more alongside McGregor, helping out McGregor. Hatate seemed to be in a more forward role. And it did seem to suit him far better than the way that he was asked to play for the most part under Brendan Rodgers. And say that double pivot, as Hacksaw is calling it, which I think is technically the right thing, will fit in well with what Wilfried Nancy likes to play. Yeah, my personal feeling is that he's not probably going to change things terribly much straight away. I think it's going to be little by little. So I suspect that his first team sheet for the Dundee match, if that is going to be his first game, will probably be very similar to the team sheet that Martin O'Neill used today and that he'll use on Sunday against Hibs. I think there might be 1 or 2 wee tweaks. I think it's probably a bit too quick, too soon, given the fact that we're playing on the Sunday. The players will get the Monday off. The players will then be into training on Tuesday for the game on the Wednesday evening. So I think there's probably too soon for Celtic to really bring in really brand new tactics. Not that a 3-4-3 would be terribly different from how Celtic could play with the players that they've got. I think Celtic's got the players to play that way. I don't think we've quite got enough centre-backs with really, really good passing ability unless we move Kieran Tierney to be one of the 3 centre-backs, which I think he would do a fine job with. Trussey's a pretty good passer. Scales isn't quite reliable enough. I think McGregor and Engels and Hatate, Bernardo, McCowan, they all could fit into the midfield roles of the system. Yep. Yep. So from watching lots and lots of videos of Major League Soccer pundits and Major League Soccer YouTube channels, that Wilfried Nancy is actually a very, very adaptable coach. He changes the systems and changes the tactics of formations depending on who the opposition is. He doesn't just play a 3-4-3. That's how he likes to start games. That's his sort of basic standard setup, but he often plays 4-4-2, 3-5-2, 2 up front. He plays a lot of different systems, and he changes the way he plays within certain confines to depend on what would work best against his opponents. As I say, one of the key people in his team is his football analyst expert, whose name I've forgotten, but I'm sure we'll find out in time what his name is. And he, Nancy, and particularly the football analyst in his coaching team, spent hours and hours and hours going through who the opposition is going to be in a couple of days' time. So typically on the day that the players are all having their rest day, he and his coaching staff and his analyst staff are in analysing the opposition's last dozen games or whatever, and creating tactics and formations and changing the players that are playing for Celtic or for Columbus or whatever to suit the different teams. He's not nearly as fixated and stayed and stubborn as Rodgers was in his 4-3-3. Rodgers was a massive, in my opinion, a massive believer of putting round pegs in square holes and square pegs in round holes, because he was so dead set on always playing 4-3-3. It's certainly the times that Celtics changed out of a 4-3-3 this season, it didn't look like Celtics players knew how to play any other system rather than 4-3-3, because for the 2 and a bit years under Rodgers that we've had in this second spell, it was pretty much the same tactics, the same formation. Every single game. We didn't really find a particularly good way of breaking down teams who were defending with 6, 7, 8, 9 defenders. Quite a few of the channels I've watched and YouTube people that I've watched are saying that Wilfried Nancy in American soccer, Major League Soccer, was always very good at breaking down teams that are ultra defensive. He's a great one for trying to get 3, 4, 5 people into the box. So there's lots of different people to pass to, lots of different options for getting the ball out wide, over the top, etc. Very keen on using pacey players up front and passing through defences, but also having decoy runners on the outside to draw players out the middle. So I think he's actually, from what I've read, a lot more of a flexible coach, a lot more of a deeper thinking coach, and also has quite a lot of different innovative thoughts on how to train players, how to motivate players, and different ways of. think you make a good point in that a lot of the teams in Scotland play much more severe low block, but the story was in Major League Soccer, particularly in the season that they won the Major League Soccer Championship, and he became the manager of the year in Major League Soccer in 2024. He was especially good breaking down defensive teams, breaking down teams that, and also changing the way he was playing from one week to another to put the other team to maximise the advantage of his team and minimise the strengths of the other teams, and exploit all their weaknesses. Not massively convinced that Ryan Porteous would fit in well at Celtic, but have to admit I haven't seen Ryan Porteous playing very much at all, apart from a couple of games for Scotland over recent times. They're undoubtedly there undoubtedly have been quite a lot of very good players who played in Major League Soccer. And looking at all the various different Celtic fan sites, it seems to be very much a 50-50 as to whether fans are enthused about Wilfried Nancy coming to the club. There are some Celtic fan sites like Hail 67 Celts are here that seems to be about 25% in favour, 60%, 70% against him. I wish him all the luck in the world. If he does do well, Celtic's going to do well. It's going to win trophies. It's going to make progress in the Europa League, and a good transfer window in January, a good transfer window in June, July, August, and we've got every chance of qualifying for the Champions League through 2, 3, 4 different rounds of qualifying, depending on how terrible our coefficient is for that qualifying campaign. So hopefully everybody is going to get 100% behind Wilfried Nancy and give him a chance to prove how good he is. There were very similar disapprovals and lack of enthusiasm and condemnation and criticism for the board when they chose Ange Postecoglou in 21. That turned out very, very well for Celtic. A lot of people were sceptical about Ange Postecoglou coming to manage Celtic, given the fact he'd managed in Australia and in Japan, and that turned out really, really well. The quality of Major League Soccer is considerable in terms of football analysis, is thought to be considerably better than the Scottish Premiership. The Opta stats people who analyse leagues for strength of teams, strength of players, competition of games, has Major League Soccer as the number 10 league in the world. English Premier League obviously is number 1. Celtic's the Scottish Premiership is way down in the 20s. So in terms of expert statistical analysis, the Scottish Premiership, the Scottish League is miles and miles below Major League Soccer. So he's done very well in Major League Soccer, which is rated a much more powerful, strong, higher quality league than our league. Yep. I think you're making a brilliant point. 100% behind brother Wilfried. I think for the sake of Celtic, that would be a really good thing for everybody to follow. 100% behind Wilfried Nancy. Give him every chance to succeed. I am convinced he wouldn't be taking the job unless he was given a commitment for a significant injection of transfer funds in January and next summer. I can see, unfortunately, that turning into a phrase used by a lot of the Scottish press, particularly the ones who are not very Celtic friendly, which is the great majority of the newspapers and online football sites in Scotland. Sorry, yes. Sorry, Paul McGuire. I was just having a good read at what you were saying there, just in case. Anyway, yes. So, having watched Jemai Simpson-Pusey when he was playing for Man City, including the couple of games he played in the Champions League last season for Man City, he is a player that might fit in really, really well into the Wilfried Nancy system, in that he is a central defender. He's big, he's strong, he's got height. He's got pace, but he's also got a really good passing ability. So he actually could be somebody that we play, that might well play central of the back three, or on the right-hand side of the back three with maybe Trusty or Kieran Tierney as the central one. So far, that Jemai Simpson-Pusey's had just that one, with about 60 minutes or so, playing more as a right back than anything else. I think he had a really good season for Man City last season, mostly in their under-21 English Premier League sort of reserve league. He did play a number of first-team games, including a couple of games in the Champions League, and that turned out really well. And I think Jemai Simpson-Pusey, assuming that Pep Guardiola lets him stay at Celtic for another 6 months, or 5 months rather, could actually be someone that fits in very well into the framework. Yes, he is highly rated at Man City. I think the idea was they were going to send him up to Celtic. He was going to get regular first-team football, and he was going to come back down to Man City next season and be a regular squad player coming off the bench, making a few starts in the league, making a few starts in the Caribou Cup, etc. I doubt that Man City's terribly happy with the way that Celtic's, primarily Brendan Rodgers, has used him. I think the only reason that Martin O'Neill's leaving is that Martin O'Neill agreed to come for a few weeks. He didn't agree to come to manage Celtic for 3 years or 5 years, etc. I don't think having a manager of 73 is a good long-term option. I think it's a very good short-term option. I think it's worked really, really well for Celtic, having him in for 6 weeks or whatever it's going to be, that he's going to be the Celtic manager. He came in, I think, the last week in October. He's managed the whole of November, so that's been 5 weeks. I think simply Martin O'Neill at 73, having not managed for 6 years, didn't want to commit to manage Celtic any longer than a couple of months. right from the very, very start, a lot of the people who were releasing stories as insiders were talking about Celtic having their new manager in by mid-December at the latest. That would appear to be what's going to happen. That we're going to get the new manager in at the start of December. So the reason that O'Neill is leaving is simply that's what he wanted to do. He didn't want to manage Celtic for a year, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years. Potentially, I'm not I don't think my channel would be particularly good in terms of having sponsorship. Maybe you should suggest that to Ryan 118 or Seltzer here or Hamish Carton, Celtic AM, one of those people. I can't remember the guy who does one fan's view, one Celtic fan's view. Maybe he would take on sponsorship, but my channel is far too wee, far too insignificant, far too unimportant for anybody to sponsor the channel. But people like Ryan 118, Hamish Carton, Celtic AM, they've got thousands and thousands and thousands of viewers and thousands and thousands and thousands of subscribers. So maybe you should do that in their next live stream. Not that Hamish Carton ever does live streams. Yes, he's been one of the whipping boys. You're quite right. He's been one of the ones who gets the blame for everything. His performances for Celtic have been very inconsistent. As Joe Hart was saying, obviously Joe Hart trained with him. At the end of Joe Hart's career, Yang had come into the club. Yeah, Joe Hart was kind of implying in the commentary that Yang's got lots and lots of talent, lots and lots of skill. What I think Yang is a player who needs confidence. He needs his confidence boosted, and I don't think he got that terribly much under Brendan Rodgers. Whether he certainly seems to have regained a lot of confidence under Martin O'Neill. Martin O'Neill was absolutely full of praise for Yang before the match and after the match. I think if somebody could get Yang playing like he did today every single game, or practically every single game, I think he would be a very good player for Celtic. Just I have my doubts that he's actually going to be able to be that kind of consistent player. That's a perfectly reasonable theory. I don't think Rodgers rated Yang at all. I don't think he saw Yang as a first-team quality player. I don't think he boosted Yang's confidence. I think Liam. I'm not the biggest. To be thoroughly honest, I'm not the biggest fan of Liam Scales, but he works very hard. He's very committed. He, for me, just lacks that wee bit of pace, that wee bit of positional sense. However, what I would say is I think he's about 25% better with Trusty beside him rather than when he's had Carmen Carter-Vickers beside him. I think he's actually benefited by having Trusty on one side and Tierney on the other side. I think the last few games, Scales has actually played a lot better. And I think he is a player who's still young enough to get better and better. I think he's also a player that's going to be loyal to Celtic. I don't see him as being a player who will leave Celtic. I think he, as long as Celtic wants him, I think he'll be at Celtic, much the same as that's the case for Ralston, Forrest, McGregor, etc. I think they're career players for Celtic. Yep. I wasn't aware that Iwata was playing at right back, but Iwata, when Ange Postecoglou signed him, Iwata could play pretty much every position across the back four and play most positions in midfield. I thought he was an intelligent player, a very versatile player, really hard-working. Did have a bit of problems with injuries, Iwata, at one point, but he overcame that. I think he was a player that Celtic should never have sold. Rodgers seemed very keen to get rid of Iwata. I think he could have been a really important player for Celtic, given his versatility. I think he would have been a really important player for Celtic at the moment, in that, again, as he covers midfield, he covered fullback, he could even cover centre-back. I think he would have been a very handy player for Celtic with all the injury problems we've had in those positions. I think you could well be right there in that, as I was mentioning a wee bit earlier on, there are several players that Rodgers basically said were no good, were rubbish, that he ditched, sent them off on loan, or sold them completely, like Lagerbielke is a good example. Iwata, another player that he said wasn't any good, got rid of him. Kwon, who I don't think he ever made a first-team start for Celtic in his 2-3 years at Celtic. He's gone off to French football. His first few games in France were good. I'm not so sure whether that's persisted. Yes, I think you're entirely right. That a good manager makes a player even better. It just felt to me a wee bit like Rodgers had his favourites. He had the players that he liked, and if you weren't one of the players that he liked, you got put in the scrap heap. You very rarely ever got a second goal. One of the few players he did give a second goal to was Liam Scales. He was all for selling Liam Scales to Aberdeen when he first came into the club, due to quite a number of injuries all at the same time. Navrocki and Welsh and Carter Vickers all being injured all at the same time. Suddenly it was Scales and Lagerbielke were our only two fit specialist centre-backs. And from then onwards, Scales became a first-team regular, and Scales was the one that got to stay on the side when Carter Vickers came back eventually later in the season. Yes, you're entirely right. I did a way back, many centuries ago. I did a video about Celtic's defensive record with Lagerbielke in the side. Celtic had a heck of a lot of clean sheets. A lot of the clean sheets actually were when Lagerbielke was playing alongside Liam Scales. After a wee bit of a dodgy game against Rangers at the start, the two of them actually formed a good partnership. They had a lot of clean sheets in their time together. However, I don't think Rodgers ever forgave Lagerbielke for getting sent off against Feyenoord in the Champions League match. He seemed to get put on the scrap heap ever since. He did play, obviously, a few minutes in the second game against Feyenoord and scored the winning goal at Celtic Park. And then I think he hardly ever played for Celtic again after that substitute appearance against Feyenoord. I think he had a couple of substitute games thereafter, but hardly ever played again. Yes. No, that you're entirely right. They managed, despite the fact it was a very much makeshift defence. Lagerbielke had been at the club for about 7 days. Scales and Lagerbielke had never played before that Rangers match. There was that slightly controversial goal that got disallowed when Lagerbielke was tripped up. But they kept a clean sheet, and they kept a lot of clean sheets after that. You're entirely right. I always thought that Lagerbielke was a player, if he was used properly, would have been a very good player for Celtic. Very comfortable stepping out of defence, good at passing, plays in a back three. At his current club, he was playing in a back three for Sweden earlier on in the international window. Chineki is an odd one. I do wonder whether the fact that Chineki's had a wee bit of problems with a leg injury off and on for the last couple of weeks, that may be why his form's taken a bit of a dip. Obviously, Chineki came in. His first few games for Celtic were just great. Then, since then, he's struggled to actually play much more than 60 minutes. He's often had one good half, and then the second half he's kind of faded away. Of course, he got put onto the bench for today's match. So he was one of the few players that Celtic played today, and he came on as a sub. Didn't actually really play that well at all. I think Chineki's probably got more of a future long term at Celtic than Yang does. I think Chineki's got more confidence, which obviously is helpful. Yep. Certainly, I don't think it would do me much confidence if I was a player in their early 20s who had left their home country to come and play in Scotland, and then their manager says that they're not good enough to play for Celtic. That doesn't do you an awful lot of good if you're a young developing player in their 20s. Certainly not a good idea to say it in public. Maybe if you say it in private and then do things to help them get better. In terms of Balikwisha, I think Balikwisha, from looking at all his highlights of his games when he was playing for Royal Antwerp and playing for Belgium at various different levels, he's a player with lots and lots of talent. Whether it's the fact that he's had some injuries that he's never fully recovered from, I don't think he's a conventional winger. The way that Rodgers, in particular, wanted his wingers to play. I think he's more of a player like Negrin, who's probably more of a floating, attacking midfielder. So I think he could have a role in the Wilfried Nancy variations. He could play as one of the two behind the front striker. I think he could be a very useful player behind the front players for Celtic. I just not convinced he's going to really have a future at Celtic as playing as a conventional wide player. I think one of the mistakes that Brendan Rodgers made playing Murray against Hearts was he also played Colby Donovan at right back. I think playing one inexperienced defender on the right side of the defence would have probably been okay. I think also in that game, none of the midfielders came back to help Donovan and Murray on the right-hand side of the defence. Kizaridis and Braga in that game played very, very well. Celtic lost their shape because Shankland was playing a bit deeper in the second half, and Rodgers did nothing at all to counteract Shankland dropping a bit deeper. Negrin didn't track back. McGregor didn't track back. And so Donovan and Murray got rather exposed. It looked like Murray's actually come back a couple of times under Martin O'Neill coming off the bench. He looks like he's pretty confident. He's got really nice, crisp, accurate passing. I think Murray, given the fact he is the best part of 6'4", so he's the tallest player at Celtic at the moment, I think he could actually be a really good player for Celtic, learning alongside a Trusty, a Tierney, a Scales, etc. I think he's probably requires an experienced right back to be on his outside, so he might be somebody who's better to play, if he is playing centre back, to have someone like Ralston outside him rather than Donovan outside him. I think Murray will do very, very well if he's got Johnson playing on his outside to give him that extra support. It would be good if he gets back to the form that he used to have. Balikwisha is going to be a good player for Celtic. The question is whether we can get him back to his best. And I think it might be finding a system or finding a role that suits Balikwisha is what actually brings Balikwisha back to the levels that he used to be able to play at, assuming that he is 100% fit again. Negrin, well, I think Negrin is very much like, again, I don't think Negrin has never ever been a central midfielder at any other club. Rodgers was dead set that he was going to play as a central midfielder. At all the previous clubs, and when he played for Sweden 2 games ago internationally with their new manager Graham Potter, he played as one of the front. He played as the second striker for Sweden. His best positions at previous clubs have been as an attacking midfielder, a second striker. He even has played on a regular basis as the main striker. Certainly, Negrin's talents at other clubs was never playing as a conventional central midfielder alongside a McGregor, alongside Hatate, alongside Engels. He was always best as a free-roaming, free-roaming attacking midfielder. He quite often could start coming off the right wing or the left wing, but still had a very free role. And I think it's another example of Rodgers playing a square peg in a round hole, that he had a certain system and he was trying to fit the players into that system, no matter whether they suited his system or not. I think Martin O'Neill's been much more flexible with the way that he's played the players. I think he's allowed a lot of the players a lot more freedom within his systems, and I think also O'Neill's tweaked the systems from one game to the next. The way he set up against Feyenoord was quite different from how he set up the team against St Mirren or against Rangers or against Midtjylland, etc. So. Anyway, so I think it's gone midnight. I've got a busy day tomorrow, so I think we should probably call it a day. It's been a lovely, nearly 3.5 hours. It's been a very, I thought for the most part, jovial, friendly, respectful, polite live stream. I'm afraid we probably should call it a day. We'll be doing another live stream again, all things considered, all going to plan next Thursday at 9:00. By that time, we will almost certainly have a new manager. We'll see how he's changing the team. We hopefully will have played against Hibs and beaten Hibs, played against Dundee and beaten Dundee, and you never know, we might even be pretty much top of the table if things went especially well for Celtic and not so well for Hearts over the next couple of games. Thank you to all the positive feedback. It's always nice to have positive feedback. So, as I say, we'll call it a day. We'll do the same thing again next Thursday. I'll do a wee advert thing on the channel on Wednesday, just confirming the times and the dates and so on, and one or two wee things to talk about. But hopefully next Thursday, we'll have brand new manager and we'll be well on the road to a bright, happy future at Celtic. So until next Thursday, thank you everybody who's participated. Thank you everybody who's commented, etc. And see you all again next Thursday. And so goodbye and hail, hail.